Good evening and welcome to our October 12th, 2022 Board of Douglas County Commissioners business meeting. I want to welcome those of you who are with us here at the old courthouse and folks joining us on Zoom. Just a bit of information about public comment to get us started. Each action item on the agenda will offer an opportunity for relevant public comment about that specific topic. We ask that you wait until that agenda item that you're here for comes up for discussion. Additionally, near the start of our meeting, we will invite folks to provide general public comment to the commission, excuse me, which is a time for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but related to general county business. General public comment will not be recorded and shared on the county's YouTube site to ensure compliance with YouTube's content policy. However, to hear public comment, individuals are always welcome to join us on Zoom or here in the courthouse during our business meetings each week. We'll first call on folks who are here in person to provide general public comment as well as agenda specific comment when the time comes. And then we will turn to online commenters who are with us. If you are on Zoom, please plan to use the raise your hand function when the time comes and listen for staff to call your name. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask everyone to give their full name plus Douglas County residents for meeting minutes. All public comments should be directed to the County Commission. We also reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker who is vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The public should know that comments received by the commission during our meetings do not represent the views of the Douglas County government. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen. Please know that online participants will not be able to view those without a computer, smartphone, or tablet during the meeting, but materials are published online for your later reference. And lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on our YouTube page and website later. With that, I will move into the consent agenda and ask if either commissioner wishes to remove anything.
I'd like to remove item 3 just to get a little more background on that.
Okay. With no other exclusions, I'd be open for a motion for the remaining items. Actually, I'm sorry. Let me back up and ask if there's anybody in the public who wishes to remove anything from the consent agenda this evening. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody raise their hand online? Okay. Now I'm ready for a motion.
Make a motion to approve items 2, 4, 5, and 6 on the consent agenda.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. Go ahead and take up Commissioner Kelly, what you pulled off first, item 1.3, and give you an opportunity to ask any questions.
Sure. I just had a question for administration a little bit. Could you give us a little bit of background? I think I understand from the packet why we're asking for it. We're going to see considerable possible development, open space plan. And so this sounds good, but what should we expect as a deliverable from them doing this survey? What does that look like in the end?
I think we moved Caitlin Stanley, our Heritage Conservation Coordinator, into the panel, and I think Caitlin can answer that question better. But I don't know if we have other questions from commissioners that we want to make sure we have. Okay, Caitlin, can you answer that question? Did you hear us?
Yeah, I think I heard it as I was being moved in as a panelist. I might have missed part of it, but Commissioner Kelly, was your question, what will be the deliverable?
Yeah, what should we expect that we'll be able to see, and how might we use that, you know, whether it's heritage conservation or even here with the county commission going forward?
Yeah, so this won't be something that's publicly accessible to everyone. This is going to be a lot of sensitive information when we're talking about archaeological information. So this is something that we hope to use internally to help inform development. But you have to have certain access. Most people have to be an archaeologist to have access to this kind of information, but we've gotten approval for the Heritage Coordinator to have access to archaeological information. And then we're working with zoning, planning codes to help inform things. So that's how we'll have that delivered. And it will be at the state. The state has an archaeological map that we view.
Caitlin, can I ask a question also?
Yes.
How often does an archaeological survey countywide need to be redone? I know this was done in the past some time ago. And this is, and how is new information gained and added to previous knowledge?
How often does it need to be redone? Well, we are pretty unique, actually, our county, in doing a countywide survey. So there aren't other examples of counties that have done this in Kansas. So it needs to be redone because of the pressures that we're seeing for development and growth. And that's the timing that we're doing this, because this was part of what was asked of us. And this will help inform open space planning as well. And then could you repeat your second part of that question, Karen?
Sure, it's how is additional information added to the previous survey?
That's a great question. So it'll be a new survey. And so it will be a new product. So it won't be added to what's existing, but a new survey done by a new consultant.
Thank you.
One more question, Caitlin. If we were not to do this, what are the potential losses from the Heritage Conservation Council?
Well, if we're not to do this, so this can help with proactive measurements, so citing things, so knowing where something is can help direct where things should go. So this is really something that can help whenever we're talking about development of anything, whether that's roads or wind or anything that has been in recent conversations. This can help just say, we've identified sites there, we know that's there, and we need to go in and do further investigation, or we have not identified sites there, we do not need to go in and do further investigation. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Commissioner Kelly again. And that information would be shared with an applicant when they make the application for that specific area?
That would be shared internally. So that would be something that we would talk with Tanya Voigt and Chad Voigt and people within the county as somebody is applying for something.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So Caitlin, is there a mechanism where either Public Works, if they have a project, or planning that has a project, that they come to you automatically for that information, or do you have to kind of stay aware and stay on top of projects that are coming forward?
At the moment, it's kind of a mix, but we have really good communication, especially with Tanya and her crew. They reach out to us multiple times a week about projects. And so we are in communication about sites that we're aware of at the moment.
Any further questions from commissioners? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Caitlin. Just hold on tight in case we end up having questions after public comment. Would anybody like to provide public comment about this item? Okay, seeing no hands in the courthouse, just double check if anybody's raised their hand virtually. All right, we'll close public comment. Any follow-up thoughts from commissioners based on Caitlin's comments?
Happy to make a motion. Motion to approve the use of funds from the 2011 through 2017 Heritage Conservation Council reserves in the amount of $186,702 for a countywide archaeological survey to occur in 2023.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And then for item 1.1, that was asked to be pulled by somebody in the public. First, I'll ask if commissioners have any questions about the minutes, assuming not, since we did not pull it. Okay, and so then I'll go ahead and open this up for public comment and invite you, Michael, to come provide 3 minutes of public comment about why you pulled this item.
If you guys are going to do these minutes and you're not going to record public comment, you need to make sure these minutes are accurate. Okay? I didn't say that I was coming in here because you are criminalizing the freedom of speech today. I said I'm here because you have in the past. And I also said that since I've been here, it hasn't happened. It's interesting how people stop getting arrested for speaking when there's extra cameras in the room. Happened at the city commission meeting last night as well. Want to draw some attention to the fact that Miss Willie last week in these minutes, it notes that she thinks that the sheriff department coming to the commission for budget decisions is just a courtesy. That is an insight into how she sees these decisions that she's making up here. When it comes to the sheriff's department, it's a courtesy. I called that out, that courtesy, when you control the purse strings, it's not accurate. And it looks like Sarah Plinsky has actually advised that it's more than a courtesy. It's actually in conformance with financial policies and practices. That means the commission does have some say in this work. That means the commission does have some say.
Is there anybody else who would like to provide public comment about this item?
My name is Dr. Justin Spees. I'm running for Douglas County Commissioner in District 1 as a Republican candidate. Question, who actually keeps the minutes? Who's typing these up?
Our executive assistant, Robin Crabtree.
Where is she at? She's not in here.
No, she's not in this room, but she is in another room monitoring it.
So another question. So then when you guys stop the recording and stuff, so how is she still listening in the meeting, or how is she keeping track of what's going on in here?
Justin, I answered your first question. I'm going to let you finish making your comment, ask your questions, and then commissioners or staff can respond to them, okay?
Probably not.
Mhm.
So then my question is, if it's not being recorded then, and she's like taking notes and she's like, oh, I didn't catch that. What did they say? How does she get to go back and check what she's writing there? Since it's not being recorded.
Do you have further comments or
Yeah,
questions?
do you motherfuckers see a problem with that?
Hey,
Do you see a
I
problem with
told
that? I'm
you-
getting tired of this stuff. You guys just sit there with blank looks on your face. This is a serious issue. We come in here and you are restricting our freedom of speech. And I'm asking a simple question of how you guys are able to document that, and you won't even answer that. Why? Why? Because you're communists. You don't care about freedom of speech. If you did, you would just go to you would come to us. We got solutions how to get this back up on YouTube, so you don't have to stop silencing us and recording us, and then you'd be able to answer a simple question right now. It's very telling that you can't answer that. Patrick Kelly, answer the question, man. Answer the question. How is she able to go back and make sure she got the minutes right? You're fucking terrible, man. Why anybody would vote for that guy? I have no idea. You have no spine, man. You have no backbone. You won't even answer the question. My guess is you don't know the answer to it, but even if you did know the answer to it, you don't have the spine to say shit.
Does anybody else have public comment about this item? Does anybody raise their hand online? Okay, we'll close public comment for this item and I will happily address your answers, Justin, your questions. So prior to meetings being recorded and being online, the meeting minutes have always been taken in a format of abbreviated notes about public comment and the discussion amongst commissioners that are taken during the meeting by our executive assistant, who types those up, brings them to the county commission back on our agenda so that we can review them, potentially provide updates or fixes to anything that we might see as commissioners while reading through those minutes, and they can be updated for the record. So meeting minutes have been the official record of county commission meetings since they began. And the YouTube recordings and the ability to watch live on Zoom, participate in Zoom, and have the meeting recorded for later viewing has only been since the pandemic. And so our official record of the meeting minutes is in paper format, and they are an abbreviated version of both public comments and commissioner comments. Any further discussion from? Your opportunity for public comment has ended. Thank you. Well, I believe that I addressed your question. It's not opportunity for back and forth. So at this point, I would entertain a motion for this last consent agenda item. Your comments have been noted, and I do not believe that there is an inaccuracy to how that was. I personally do not believe that there's an inaccuracy to how that was contextualized and printed. So if other commissioners have a different opinion. Michael, I am not going to keep going back and forth with you. Thank you for your comments. I have responded to them. Is there any other response from other commissioners?
So I think it's important to clarify that, you know, we receive questions all the time and we receive comments all the time from members of the public. It is within the authority of the elected officials, whether they decide to make changes based on those questions, to ask questions, to make adjustments to any item that they wish to make. It is not the authority of those who bring up the questions to do that. That's the way it's designed. That's the way it works. And just because someone asks a question or brings up a concern that they have does not require an edit or even the question to be answered if those who are elected don't feel that the question needs to be answered. We do record our meetings. We have for quite some time. And those recordings are used in creating the minutes. We've done audio recordings so that we can go back and create those documents. So I appreciate the questions. As an elected official and one who sits in this seat, it's my determination whether I should elevate those questions or not, and make a change to the item or not. So I'm confident in what we've got, even though there have been questions raised. I'm okay making a motion to approve the minutes for August 31st, September 7th, September 14th, and September 21st.
Second, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to our general public comment section. We do not have a sign-up sheet today. We have a number of people here, some who might be here for topic-specific issues, but I'm just gonna do it by show of hand. Who?
Sandy Day into the panel. Sandy, you're in the panel.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Good
I-
evening, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just give us a second here, Sandy.
This is an item that I voted on actively as part of the planning commission, so I will need to abstain from any conversation or voting on this item.
Okay, thank you for that. Go ahead, Sandra.
Thank you. May I share my screen, please?
You should be able to.
Okay. Can you see the screen at this time?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Sandy Day, Planning Office. This item was originally submitted concurrently with also an annexation request and a rezoning. The applicant has since withdrawn the zoning and the annexation request, but has asked that the comprehensive plan amendment be continued. The comprehensive plan amendment would affect the K10 and Farmers Turnpike plan, which on my screen is this sideways L shape. And specifically, the request is to modify this portion of the plan, which is currently identified as a future land use for residential and office. And the request was for a residential designation. Throughout the review process, staff looked at various land uses, both what is existing within the city, what is existing within the plan area very broadly. And the conclusion was that staff did concur with the applicant that the proposed office component is probably less necessary in this particular part of the plan boundary, that residential uses in general are something that the community very much needs, and that was a component of the analysis also with the annexation, but that's not an item before you. The proposed request modifies that land use to move to a medium density residential. The medium density residential use can take many different forms, whether it is detached housing on smaller lots or a form of multi-dwelling or attached housing. All of those are options that are within that larger category of medium density residential development. Another piece of this analysis was how this project fits into the department's long-term work program. We have a number of different planning efforts that are going on right now. We have begun that effort with the west of K10 plan. So that is part of the plan boundary that is over generally on the west side of K10 extended. We are also engaged in a neighborhood plan as well. To look at the K10 and Farmers Turnpike plan that's actually on our work plan to begin sometime in 2023. So we are outside of that boundary a little bit, but in response to a particular development application. And as we look at the need for additional residential uses within our community and providing a broader range of residential uses in our community, both low density, medium, and higher density opportunities, this was a reasonable place to locate that within the broader scope. This item comes to you with a split vote from the Planning Commission. I think that is reflective of some of the challenges that were related to the project. And I think those were also related to the scope of the request in terms of the annexation and the zoning without a lot of subdivision plat work. So there's many more facets of development that would need to be assessed with a future project, including extending sanitary sewer. So that does put that further out a little bit in the planning realm. But by modifying the land use in the plan, that does provide both the city, as we do some facility planning in the future for these areas, and how that connects and interconnects with some of the other planning work that's going on both to the east and to the west of this property. The overall land use was supportable. I'm happy to answer any questions. I believe the applicant was going to be here, although I don't know that I can actually see them. But thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. I'll just ask is the applicant here with us in the room? Okay, I'm not seeing any head nods, so are there? Go ahead, David.
David Hamby with BG Consultants representing Garber Enterprises. They're the owner of the property. And I appreciate Sandy's work on this. We went through numerous steps to get to this point. What we found was during the process of annexation rezoning was that the land use defined as residential office was not a great fit for switching to directly to a zoning district. And as you know, or probably know and looking at the packet, there's really not a high demand for commercial or office space right now. There is a higher demand for residential. That said, there's not an immediate plan for any work on this, so it doesn't mean there's anything changing on what the horizon is. The annexation and rezoning applications were withdrawn back in January when this came to Planning Commission. So this is just coming up now, finishing that process up of changing that comp plan. So if and sometime in the future the owner wants to do something or sell that property, it would be set up for that residential use. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you both. I don't have any questions top of mind, Commissioner Kelly. Nope. Okay. All right. Thank you for that overview. We'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Is there anybody here who wishes to provide public comment about this agenda item?
Steve Jacob, County Commission candidate. Just in general, in Lawrence and Douglas County, part of my platform is to reduce to make housing more affordable is more supply, and changing commercial to residential is one of the big ways to do that. So I'm hoping that not only this gets approved, but even down the road, this continues to happen because the demand is obviously residential. And we just need more of it to keep the cost under control. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here who wishes to provide public comment about this item? Okay, double check if any virtual hands are raised. Oh, please come forward. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bobby Flory and I'm with the Lawrence Home Builders Association. And I have to tell you that it is very unusual that I would be down here commenting on an individual application. I've been with the home builders for over 20 years and we have made it a policy not to come down and promote, advocate one way or the other on individual projects. However, times are different now. Some significant things have changed. And one of those things is that we have a lot inventory crisis. And we have to do everything we can to increase our lot supply. And the second major factor that's changed everything is the coming of Panasonic. We learned in July that we're going to have over, and now the number is 4,500 jobs associated with Panasonic, plus an additional 4,000 jobs. And that is just a short distance, less than 20 miles from our eastern border of our county, that are going to be coming to this northeast part of Kansas. So I'm down here to encourage you to support this plan amendment and to make it known to potential investors and neighbors, existing property owners, what the expectations are and what the demand is going to be in that area. I'm a former planning commissioner, and I know, and some of you have been as well, that you make your best guess on what to anticipate for the needs when we do comprehensive planning, when we do area plans. However, none of us prior to July even anticipated what has come before us, this wonderful opportunity of Panasonic. So I think that's a big game changer, added to already a complicated lot inventory problem. So with that, I think I would just answer any questions.
Thanks for your comments.
I would also like to thank you for your good work of taking public comment.
Appreciate it. Anybody else here with public comment on this item? Okay, I'll just double check that nobody's raised their hand virtually on Zoom. All right, we'll close this for public comment, bring it back for some discussion between Commissioner Kelly and I appreciate that the spot we're in and the evolution of this request. And I think I have no reason not to support it. I will mention that I think my hope and preference is for higher density plans, but I appreciate that the medium density is sort of a compromise position based on what was a pretty lengthy discussion with a lot of public engagement about this item when it was coupled with annexation in front of the Planning Commission. So I'm supportive of this, hopeful that it helps us move forward and that there's more to follow.
So I'm somewhat familiar with this property in this area because sad to say 10 years now, you 6 on the Planning Commission, 4 here. I've seen this project and this, well, maybe not this specific project, but this area multiple times. And to me, it's unfortunate that, the public has to come in and ask for comp plan amendments, small section by small section at a time. I'm disappointed, and I understand that our planning department continually says they are overwhelmed, and I get that. But this North Area land plan really needs revision. That whole line along the Farmers Turnpike needs a ton of work. And so I'm glad to approve this, and at the same, and glad to hear it's on the timeline, Sandy. Yeah, I get that, and Sandy knows how I feel about this, and just appreciate Commissioner Bobby Flory's comments earlier that we do need to figure out how we can get more residential lots available. I was happy to see the City Commission approve this as well, so that's progress, and I'm happy to make a motion if that's okay with Commissioner Reed. I move to approve a comprehensive plan amendment CPA 21-00379 to Plan 2040, Chapter 8B, specific land use plans K10 and Farmers Turnpike Plan. Maybe I need to do and adopt joint ordinance resolution.
You got it. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, David. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Steve, for your comments also. With that, we'll move on to another agenda item from Planning Department. Is it, Sandra, are you presenting this one item? Nope.
Oh, since Mary
Okay.
Miller,
Have a good evening. Hi, Mary.
move Mary into the panel.
Take it away.
Okay, I will share my screen. And so this item is a conditional use permit for an indoor sports or recreation facility in the unincorporated area of the county. And it's being proposed for the Veritas Christian School Gymnasium located at 960 East 1296 Road. It is just between East 1296 Road, which was the former Highway 59, and the new Highway 59. And it's just at the very south border of the Lawrence urban growth area. A site plan was approved for the Veritas School for phase 1 of the school in 2019. But this phase only included the gymnasium and some ancillary classrooms. And as only the gymnasium was being constructed at that time, a condition was added to the site plan. And that condition was that if any recreational uses were proposed, they would take a conditional use permit. And the thinking was that with a gymnasium, if the school doesn't follow, it might be possible that this would turn into kind of an unofficial recreational facility. So if recreational uses came, the idea was that a conditional use permit would be obtained for those. So we had a site plan approved in 2019 for phase 1. That's the top site plan. It shows the parking area and then the school or gymnasium. And in 2022, a site plan for phase 2 was approved. It's a little bit more detailed, but we still have the access drive and we have the parking area. There's a new parking area being proposed to the south of that. The gymnasium remains. There's a future locker room storm shelter being proposed for phase 3. And then we have 4 modular classrooms. There's a fire access aisle around all of this, and then a lagoon system. So this was submitted in 2021 and was approved in early 2022. However, with the review of this, it was discovered that there's a KDOT easement under the building. And so the site plan was approved subject to the condition that this easement would be vacated. KDOT had indicated they were willing to vacate it. The vacation took quite a bit longer than expected, so that was just vacated recently and this site plan was released. And this slowed the process or the progress for the school on building this phase. And so they had to lease a facility in Lawrence for their classrooms. They still use the gymnasium for their athletics and the phys ed classes, but they have their classrooms in the city of Lawrence. And they'll have those for a few years, and then they'll continue working on developing this phase. But the conditional use permit was requested to allow them to rent the gym out to volleyball and basketball clubs for practices. So with a conditional use permit, we always look at the review criteria and the golden factors. And the first one is the use compatible with the zoning and land use of the surrounding area? The property is zoned Ag 2, and that's transitional agriculture. And there is transitional agriculture to the west, the north, and the east. Other directions of the property is zoned Ag 1 or agriculture. There is a section of CP or cluster preservation. That's the rural residential zoning district to the southwest. And when we look at the uses in the area, per the Douglas County Appraiser's Office, agriculture shown in purple and residential shown in yellow are the primary uses. There's one property that's listed as vacant, and that's an appraiser's category. I think it's just undeveloped. And then we have an institutional use to the southwest. That's a cemetery. And the school, I think, would be classified as institutional as well, but they hadn't updated their database at that time. With this conditional use permit, there are conditions being recommended, and these would limit the scope of the recreational facility. We worked with the applicant based on what they intend to do. The conditions being recommended are that there be a maximum number of players and coaches at one time, limited to 30, and for approximately 6 hours a week. And practices would usually be about 2 hours each. There'd be no games or tournaments associated with the club use. And it's understood that when the players and coaches come, there may be associated family members present. It's not the total attendance at any time is limited to 30, but that limit of 30 would do a good job of just limiting the overall attendance. The facility will continue to be used for the school's athletics. However, the applicant noted that when the club use is there, it'll be during the off season when the school is not using it for their games. Now, the proposed use would not require any changes to the property and would not actually add a new use. It would just add a different component or a new user, and that the athletic use would be clubs and groups. So the proposed use, indoor sports or recreation facilities, should be compatible with the zoning and land uses in the area, given that limited scope of activities and the fact that it will be located within an existing school gymnasium. We always look at, will the use impact the character of the area? And for the character of the area for rural properties, we usually look at an area about 1 mile from the subject property. In this case, we're not looking to the east of Highway 59 because given the right-of-way and the nature of Highway 59, it's unlikely that this use would impact the character to the east of the highway. And we look at this area about 1 mile from this property on the west side of Highway 59. It is a mix of residential and agricultural uses. There's woodland in the area to the west. Access to the facility is taken from East 1296, which is County Route 1045, or the old Highway 56 or 59, sorry. It goes up to access Highway 59 within about a half a mile. And so with these factors, the fact that we're using an existing building and the access to Highway 59 is about a half mile from the property, this use should not have any impact on the character of the area. And then we look at other review criteria. One of those, what is the suitability of the property to the uses to which it is currently restricted? Well, it is restricted with the Ag 2 district to various uses. The school today would require a CUP, but when it was submitted in 2018, it was approved with a site plan. So it currently has a automatic CUP. As it's developed and has an approved plan for a school expansion, it's not suitable for agricultural or residential uses, but it is well suited to the school and the athletic use that's being proposed. There should be no impact on the natural environment as there's no physical changes being proposed. As I mentioned, it's within a half a mile of the access to Highway 59, and it has direct access to the paved higher classification road, which was the old Highway 59. And then we look at, is the use in compliance with the comprehensive plan? And the comprehensive plan doesn't speak specifically to recreational and athletic uses, but some of the recommendations, one is to minimize the conversion of agricultural land to non-agricultural uses. And this CUP will not utilize agricultural land. It's already been developed with a school. And it also encourages combining or creating multiple use facilities, such as school and community centers or fire and police stations, to improve accessibility and efficiency. And so a school often serves as a community center. And in this case, and the Planning Commission discussed this at their meeting and wanted to clarify, it could serve for community uses. For instance, Boy Scout meetings could be held here. Schools regularly do that. It's just that the athletic use would require this conditional use permit due to the fact that the school is not completely located on this site, and it's basically a standalone gymnasium. And then we look at whether or not it's appropriate to put a time, whether it's compliant with the zoning regulations. When it was site planned in 2019, it was compliant with the regulations at the time. They did change in 2020, and with the revised regulations, the side setbacks are increased from 10 feet to 30. And therefore, the mechanical equipment that they had planned on the north side of their school building is now in the setback. So it was necessary for them to get a variance on the Board of Zoning Appeals, which they obtained. And so the plans are compliant with the zoning regulations, and the CUP doesn't impact any of the physical characteristics of the site. And the last thing we look at is whether it's appropriate to put a time limit on the use. And we are recommending a 10-year time limit. This is a little unique. Once the school use comes to the site and the school is all on the site, they could allow other facilities to use their facilities. Schools do that regularly without requiring the conditional use permit. And so the 10-year time limit, in 10 years, it could be evaluated. If the school's on the site, the CUP would not be needed. If it's still not there, then maybe the CUP would be reevaluated or perhaps approved for a longer time frame. But we just didn't want a CUP on the books for a use that would be permitted by right. And the Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward the CUP to the Board of County Commissioners with a recommendation for approval based on the findings in the staff report and subject to the conditions. And those conditions, as I mentioned, are the 10-year time frame, the limit on practices, no more than 6 per week, no more than 30 players or coaches in each, and each practice is about 2 hours. And this is only for the club practice. The school is allowed to use the facility for all the practices and games they need. There'll be no club games or tournaments permitted. And then tornado and fire plan must be submitted and an updated certificate of occupancy obtained before the Zoning and Codes Office will release the certificate of occupancy. So this is something of just a notification to the applicant knowing that this is the last step they would need to take. Once the conditional use permit is approved, before they can actually get the permit and commence the use, these steps need to be finalized just to ensure the safety of those using the facility. So that concludes my presentation. And I know the applicant, I believe, is present today, and I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any for me.
Thank you, Mary. Is the applicant present here with us in person or online?
I believe they may be on Zoom. We sent them Zoom invitations.
We'll get them moved over. And Aaron, if you can hear me while you're being moved over, you're welcome to provide any additional information or make any comments you'd like commissioners to consider.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mary. I'll be brief. Mary covered everything very well. My name is Aaron Gaspers. I'm with CFS Engineers representing the owner. We just kind of see a need for this type of facility ever since it was built back in 2019. As Mary mentioned, this is just for club practices, no games or tournaments, but yes, Veritas games and practices will still be held there. Most of the time, the club practices are typically off season from the regular season. And most of the time, these club teams have an athlete or two from Veritas on these teams. So just kind of a few other brief points, and I can answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Open it up for questions from any commissioners. Commissioner Willie, go ahead.
I have a question for Mary. So I watched the Planning Commission meeting where this item was discussed, and the only real item of concern that was shown there was that the conditions might be too stringent, which is not always something that we hear. Have you had a chance to work with Aaron to see if that works for his client, or if this is the request, or if there are any modifications you're looking for?
Well, the conditions are based on Veritas's request. They requested 2 practices with 20 people present, and we suggested expanding that just to allow a little bit more flexibility to the 3 practices a week, up to 6 hours. However, they want to arrange that with 30 people present, and Veritas seemed satisfied with that. You know, that seemed to fit what they intended to do. And so we were careful in the conditions to mention that it's the club use. So we're not limiting community activities. It's a little bit tricky because a school can let Boy Scouts and other community groups use their facility. And the only reason the CUP is required is we just don't want to turn this into a sports arena, kind of unofficial sports arena, and then we won't with this scale of a project. But when it was site plan, that was a concern, is if the school didn't come there, we had an empty gymnasium and someone came and said, we want to use it for sports, we'd want to be able to do a CUP. So I believe the applicant is okay with the conditions, but Aaron could probably answer that.
Yes, I mean, we're on board with that as well. I mean, Veritas, you know, this is our home too, right? And we want to keep it our home. We want to make sure that we have say of who's in there and who isn't. And really this club practice has been the only component, I would say, beyond Veritas that has approached us at this time. I mean, we can always come forward with another request in the future, but as far as Veritas, and we'd like to keep it our home, this is our use, and we're comfortable with the conditions as they are set.
Follow-up question, if that's all right. So Mary, when the school use is fully on board and phase 2 is completed, will this conditional use permit really serve a purpose, or does it kind of sunset behind the uses that are permitted with the school anyway?
Well, the conditional use permit would no longer be needed, but, and it would expire after 10 years. So if the school comes on site, they may just want to let it expire because it wouldn't be needed. And that's why we have the 10-year time frame. We didn't want to have a CUP running forever that isn't needed. If it is needed, if they're not there fully with the next 10 years, then we could look at the CUP again. But I believe they intend to be there by that time. So that would kind of be the sunset provision, is that 10 years. We expect it to just go away.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Is there anyone here who wishes to provide public comment about this item? All right, seeing no such indication, I'll double check for virtual hands. All right, we'll close public comment, bring this back for discussion or further comments from commissioners. I didn't have any questions. I appreciate the overview. It makes sense to me why this request came forward and what the goals of it are to achieve and to mitigate sort of unintended consequences of, I suppose, unregulated use of that space in the future. So I appreciate staff's work and appreciate Commissioner Willie's question to just confirm that it is agreeable and a good working position for Veritas as well. Any other comments?
I would make a motion if you're ready.
Just one quick comment, and I think it has to do maybe a little bit with the conditions, and that's, there's a high demand for this kind of space in Douglas County. I mean, there's a lot of sports teams that are looking for space. So maybe another interpretation of keeping those limits on is it lets Veritas sort of manage the numbers and the demand for that space. So if they're okay with it, I think that's great.
Okay, Commissioner Willie, you want to make that motion?
Sure. I move to approve the conditional use permit for indoor sports and recreation facility, including conditions 1 through 3 from the staff report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Mary, thank you, Aaron. All right, that will move on to item 3.3. Sarah, would you like to introduce this, or am I pulling up Bob?
Thanks, commissioners. I want to welcome specifically to the table, Dr. George Thompson, who is the director of the Treatment and Recovery Center, and Bob Tryansky, not a doctor, who is our director of behavioral health projects. And they're going to join me here because we're going to kind of give this presentation. So I'm going to have them join me at the table since we're going to be kind of all talking together. So everybody's got a microphone. And while I get the screen ready to share, I just want to take this opportunity that, how grateful I am for both of these gentlemen's expertise and their dedication to this project. And I couldn't be happier to have them really walking the commission through where we're currently at the Treatment and Recovery Center. And so we're just going to give a brief presentation and then just open it up for commissioner questions and comments. So I'm going to try to share.
I'm going to try to drive this. Thank you and good evening, commissioners. You know, on June 23rd, most of the people in this room were over in front of a new resource in the community, the Treatment and Recovery Center. It was a very exciting time and a very exciting day to celebrate the sort of culmination of a lot of work to design a facility, a lot of work to pull partners together. It was a great moment for the community to celebrate the completion of the facility. It's been several months since we cut the ribbon on the facility. And, you know, over the last couple of weeks, we've heard comments from the public and these meetings, and all of us have heard comments and questions from people at Dillon's. And when you bump into people in this community and they have a very simple question: what's going on with the Treatment and Recovery Center and why isn't it open? And so what we want to do is we want to talk to you, and then we want to explain to the community, we want to explain to the public sort of where we are with this project, because this is not a excuse disguised as an explanation, but it's complicated. And so in order to sort of really understand what's going on, we want to have an opportunity to explain the complexity. And I think really it's important to remember that from the beginning, this project has been complicated, but it's been driven by at the core by community will to do what's along the bottom. This is a picture from 6 years ago when the original design process started for this project. And those are employees from Burt Nash. Those are members of the community. You can see the various aspirations and thoughts and goals and dreams. And I think the thing at the bottom is the thing that really is shared purpose for all of us. And that is, what can we do to create the best crisis center in the country? And that energy led to, you've all heard this story, but I always think it's helpful to, you know, pull pictures up to a very big plan, a very bold plan, a very large plan, and a very large building that was 38,000 square feet, with the idea that if people came in and were in a crisis and they were having a substance use problem, they were intoxicated, they would sober up in one part of the building. And then if they needed detox services, they would come to this part of the building. But if they had a mental health issue, they would be on this side of the building. It was a model that was modeled after San Antonio, after multiple visits down to San Antonio, and it was a good aspiration of what we were trying to do, but it was not the right aspiration. It was not scaled appropriately. And we started to hear from, and by we, I mean the county and Burt Nash, we started to hear from other partners, from LMH, from Heartland Community Health Center, from the health department, from the housing authority. And the question was really pretty simple. Is this the best plan? Is this the right plan for our community? And what's really been great about the collaboration between these partners is, I think these partners elevated the mission and said, you know, a crisis center is not a magic bullet. And if we just build a facility, again, I remember when I first got into this position, somebody came up to me and said, if you're not careful, you're going to build another homeless shelter with just additional services. So the push was really to make sure that we were thinking about a system of behavioral health crisis care. And that system needed to have a more robust 24/7 crisis line. It needed consideration of mobile teams, mobile response that are linked to co-responders. It needed the best crisis facility in the country and a crisis center that could really handle the high level of acuity that people who struggle with complex care needs have. And most importantly, we needed to invest in those post-crisis wraparound services that help a person to avoid kind of returning to crisis. So this system of care, this integrated system of care, was what we're striving for. And the crisis center is a vital component of that system of care, but it's not the only component of that system of care. So I just invite everybody to keep this in mind as we put this in context and we talk about this. But here's how that shaped up in terms of a plan evolved. Thoughts and thinking about what was possible changed. And we thought if we right-size the facility, that opens up some space. We might not just have a crisis center. There might be an opportunity to do some things with supportive housing, permanent and transitional supportive housing. If we partner and maybe move some land agreements around, we might be able to put a transitional home operated by Burt Nash. We might be able to leverage $2.2 million in HUD funds through the leadership and and guidance of the Housing Authority. And so a crisis center evolved into a treatment and recovery campus. And that treatment and recovery campus is settled and nestled in a residential neighborhood. It's strategically located directly across the street from LMH and from Burt Nash. The evolution of the thinking, returning to the drawing board several times, working through difficult conversations and figuring out the right relationships among partners has all been a part of this process. And so, you know, the crisis center became part of a recovery campus. But the recovery campus is also part of this integrated system of care. And the system of care, it requires being able to address pulling partners in, like KSPHQ is now operating our 988 line. Burt Nash launched a mobile team. We'll be coming to you on Wednesday night of next week to share the progress of that and to ask for your support to continue the work of Burt Nash with their mobile team that is now available and online from 8 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And so the Treatment and Recovery Center is well along its way, but we have some challenges. And we have challenges because there are some complexities that have come our way that were not anticipated for no fault of our own in this community. And complexity is part of a crisis system. So Dr. Thompson and I and Monica Kurtz and Stacy Cooper and Matthew Cravens, our senior data analysts, we've been participating in a crisis system learning community for the last year, monthly, with subject matter experts from around the country, with Iowa City, Iowa, with Grand Rapids, Michigan, with the city of Miami, with the city of New York. We're one of 6 communities that this learning community, and they're really interested in the questions that we're trying to wrestle with and wrestle through, and the challenges of doing what we're proposing to do in a community of our size. So the crisis, complexities are: how do we build and sustain a 24/7, 365 behavioral health crisis system in a community of our size, 122,000 people, in a state without Medicaid expansion? That's a complicated question. How do we ensure that individuals in crisis receive the right care in the right setting at the right time? And the right time means, how do we ensure that it happens every time? How do we maximize outside funding sources and foster transparency and accountability and continuous quality improvement while minimizing competition between agencies? How do we hold coalitions and emerging partnerships together? How do we ensure fiscal discipline and accountability as we move from where we are now to where we want to be 5 years from now? And how should county government, this is the real challenge for Douglas County to ask itself, how does county government effectively leverage its position as convener, as a strategist, and as a funder to pull together behavioral health, justice system, community stakeholders, and formalize crisis system governance? Crisis system governance requires relationships with county and municipal leadership. It requires healthcare and human service providers. It requires emergency management, law enforcement, criminal justice services, citizens with lived experience, community stakeholders. It is a very complex series of questions. And again, not to make excuses, but to be able to sort of wade into some of the complexities that we're facing in this moment, in this process, in this season that we're in. So we want to talk, and when I say we, I want to turn this over to Dr. Thompson, because Dr. Thompson really is the one, and his team and his leadership team and the folks that are getting prepared to be able to meet the needs of anybody who walks through anytime, 24/7. Want Dr. Thompson to kind of walk us through some of the challenges we've had. Particularly the one we really want everybody to understand is what we've unexpectedly faced with a licensure challenge.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. So in 2017, Kansas passed the Crisis Intervention Act that called for the creation of a new type of facility for Kansas called a Crisis Intervention Center. So up to that point, there was not such a facility in Kansas. In the process of that planning, that's when Douglas County got interested in building the best crisis center in the country, right here. And we've been planning to get licensed as a crisis intervention center. But as things often happen, the regulations for the crisis center which come out of the legislation, have not been promulgated. They have not been released publicly. And that means that nobody in Kansas can get licensed as a crisis intervention center at this point. So we've been talking with KDADS for a long time, the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services, who licenses the crisis intervention centers, but also licenses other facilities, hospitals, residential facilities, and those type of organizations. And a number of the leadership of KDADS are actually from this community. Secretary Howard was involved early on in the project before she was the secretary of KDADS in facilitating a group of people having discussions about how do you build this crisis center. So KDADS has been very interested from the beginning in helping us to get up and running and to be licensed so that we can operate. So we've been talking with them, and in March we said, we really like to get open by the 1st of July. And they said, okay, let's see if we can do that. However, what we learned is these regulations hadn't been released and we wouldn't be able to be licensed by that time. So on June the 6th, Commissioner Andy Brown, who's the Commissioner for Behavioral Health Services for KDADS, said, we've been putting our heads together. We want you to get licensed. We want you to be able to do the things that you guys have been planning on doing. And we have a suggestion for you. Because we can't license you as a crisis intervention center, we've come up with an alternative. And that alternative was to get licensed as a private psychiatric hospital. A different license, but that would allow us to do the same services. You could think of it as you get a commercial driver's license, but you can still drive a Hyundai like I drive, right? You don't have to drive a big truck just because you have that license. You don't have to be a hospital in order to, if you have that license. And so our team began looking into what would that require. And so, and our team, I'll say, I have a leadership team at the TRC. There's been more than 50 people at LMH working on this project and more than 20 people at Burt Nash working on this project. So it's quite a big team across different parts of the community, along with support from the county, especially Bob Tryansky, the director of behavioral health projects. And so as we're looking at that, we're looking at, all right, we're going to get licensed as a psych hospital instead of a crisis center. What does that mean for accreditation? So our plan had been to get accredited by the Joint Commission, and it's actually a different set of standards if you get licensed as a private psychiatric hospital than as a crisis intervention center. Behavioral health and human services standards compared to hospital standards. And so for several weeks, we were doing due diligence to find out what exactly are the additional requirements. And that's too much in the weeds to tell you what that is, but it's additional requirements. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, you can get what's called deemed status. That means that you can bill Medicare for services. And there are different conditions of participation for a person or for a facility that's licensed as a hospital rather than a crisis center. So for several weeks, we're doing that due diligence. About 36 days after we got that note, we'd actually made our application to KDADS for the license. I thought that was a pretty quick turnaround. The team was working the very next day. I had a crosswalk from Danelle Cup and Brooke Bacon at LMH in the accreditation department outlining, here's what it looks like for us. And then we also wanted to know, what would that allow us to do? Would that indeed allow us, as KDADS was saying, to do the things that we wanted to do, but we wanted to check that out ourselves. And so a crisis intervention center can provide 24/7 services. A private psychiatric hospital, it can provide 24/7 services. Crisis intervention center can provide both combined mental health and substance use services. So in that big drawing that Bob showed you first, those were separated. But in this facility, we can do those in a combination way, which is important because people don't always disclose that they're having substance use issues. And many times they have both issues. And so this gives us the ability to address the whole person in a comprehensive way. private psychiatric hospital does the same thing. And then the third set of things were involuntary admissions. One of the things that this center needed to be able to do was to take any person, regardless of their level of psychiatric acuity, meaning no matter how aggressive they were, how much in despair they were, feeling like hurting themselves, killing themselves, no matter how much their voices were bothering them, they hadn't been sleeping because of mania, how intoxicated they were, or how much in withdrawal they were. We wanted to be able to take care of those people. And I followed the Proposition 1 discussions back in 2018. And what I understood was we really want to keep people out of jail. And in order to keep people out of jail, we have to take people regardless of how severe their condition is. And so we need to be able to build a facility that does that. So involuntary services is an important part of that. And a hospital can also do involuntary admissions, because when the state legislature wrote the Crisis Intervention Act in 2017, they also changed the Care and Treatment Acts to allow for a private psychiatric hospital to take involuntary patients in the same or a similar way to a crisis intervention center. So we got that note on June the 6th. By the first part of July, those due diligence aspects were done and we submitted our application. And then there were a few other things that KDAD's required. And so by August the 2nd, they said that our license was complete. So we went in less than 2 months from not expecting to get licensed as a hospital to be able to have a complete application. And the reason that that was important was that the state has 90 days to give you a license once your application is complete. So that started the clock ticking. And over that time, they're reviewing our materials. They ask us for more materials, that kind of thing. The good news is yesterday, they granted us that license. And so we were very excited about that. And we've been given a provisional license through June the 30th of this coming year. And what they explained to us is that everyone gets a provisional license because they need to be able to evaluate some things that aren't in the building already, such as the kitchen. They can see the kitchen, but it doesn't have any food, nothing's happening there. So they need to be able to see a kitchen in operation. They also need to see patient records, but you can't have patients until you have a license. So they have to come back and see patient records and then the personnel files as well. So those will be the three things that they're mostly looking for when they come back the second time, somewhere before June the 30th. So at this point, we've gone from thinking we're going to get licensed as a crisis intervention center, pivoting to applying for a private psychiatric hospital in just a little bit over, what's that, 4 months, 5 months? I can't count that high, but from June to October, we've gotten that license now, which is an amazing feat, and it's an effort of a number of people across the community. I think it's a sign of how much this community cares about this facility. There are other things that we need to do, and one of the goals that I have is that people, when they come to our facility, feel like they're in good hands. And the reason that that's important is that that allows them to come sooner than they would if they are a little nervous about coming to our facility. That good hands feelings means we can take care of anybody. That's that acuity question. That we're competent, and we're competent both in a highly medical way and in a highly therapeutic way. Sometimes a crisis center will focus on one or the other, but not both together. But in our model, we focus on both of those things at the same time. But also, to be in good hands, you have to feel that people understand you, they want to know your experience, and that they care about what you're going through, and that they've been there. Some of them have been there themselves. And so to build a facility where you get a simple experience, an important experience of being in good hands, it's a simple experience, but there are actually hundreds or maybe thousands of details that have to be accomplished for that to happen. And there have to be hundreds, if not thousands, of decisions made. And my job as the executive director of the Treatment and Recovery Center is to make sure every time we make a decision, we're making a decision that gives people a greater sense of being in good hands and not a lesser sense of being in good hands. And so if we're taking a little bit longer, what I am here to guarantee is that the payoff will be the very first person that comes to our facility will feel like they're in good hands.
So in the meantime, one of the other things is we just want everybody to understand that these various components of the crisis system are also coming online. So the crisis center is not open yet. There's still some complexity to move through. But at the same time, Dr. Thompson's team is serving people in the emergency department with that higher level of care. They are serving people at Burt Nash. 988 is now online, and if you dial 988 and you have a 785 area code, you're going to get our local mobile crisis line. If you don't have a 785 or 913 area code, I'm always going to say this at a public microphone, you should dial 8412345. But the point is, there's now 24/7 crisis response on the phone. And 80% of those calls should be resolved on the phone. The Burt Nash mobile team launched on September the 11th. As we said, we're going to come back and share with you next week the vision of how Burt Nash will leverage and continue to leverage those CCBHC funds to be able to provide much more coverage than we envisioned a year to a year and a half ago, when we thought that all of the funding for the mobile team was going to have to come from the sales tax. And as you can see, Dr. Thompson and his team are working tirelessly. They're doing everything they can, and we want to provide as much support as possible to make that happen. The CCBHC.
And Bob, can I just jump in? Just jump in for 1 second. What I realized somewhere in the middle of this process is we're not just building a crisis center, we're creating a crisis system of care. And that's a much bigger job than just building a building that has some people in it working. But we're liaisoning with the intake department at Burt Nash so that when we write an assessment, that counts as their intake. And they can just assign somebody to a therapist right away without having to go get another intake. We're liaisoning with the physicians in the emergency room at LMH so that we can communicate back and forth, and we can, if I have a patient has medical necessity, I can send them to the ED. If they have a patient that really belongs at the TRC, it's easier for them to get there. Meetings with Judge Simpson, the DA's office, EMS, the sheriff, the police chief, a number of different people. How do people get to our facility? And then once they get to our facility, if we don't have anywhere to send them, it's really not that useful of a place. But if we have the ability to send them to Burt Nash and to DECA and to Heartland Radak, to private practice therapists and to primary care physicians, then we're really doing a good job, because not only can we help people move through their crisis, we can set them up with the supports that they need to keep going in the community afterwards.
I think my next slide is, I want to go back, Bob. How do I go back? Thanks. I think my job is to kind of wrap this up and to kind of talk about next steps and where we are. I think this conversation about building an entire system of care is really important for these conversations to talk about what the next steps are and the complexity of where we are at this time. After the ballot passed in late 2018, the county began working right away on how do we implement the aspirations of that ballot and begin work on this process. One of the first organizations that we reached out to is Connections Health Solutions. We formally began a relationship with them in March of 2019. They've really served as consultants and mentors to this entire system throughout this entire process. Members, myself, members of county staff, members of LMH staff, members of Burt Nash staff, as well as community members involved with behavioral health partners, have all been to Arizona, where they operate 2 crisis centers in a model very similar to ours, and in a model that we've emulated as we've redesigned the physical building, as Bob talked about, and as we talked about the program and the services. So, we've asked members of Connections to follow us on this journey and to continue with us in this process and really help us determine, as we get here close to the goal line, which I hate to call it a goal line because it's not really a goal line because we got a lot of work to do and it's a whole system and it's going to continually evolve. But for a day of weird metaphors, the goal line is we get close to that to help us identify really what those final steps are to really get where we need to be in terms of being able to open and operate sustainably. Dr. Chris Carson with Connections is here and I want to give him a minute or two to kind of say a little bit about their engagement in this project. And I want to say, like, I've had a lot of conversations with Dr. Thompson and how important they have been in sort of shaping the vision of where we've been. And, Dr. Thompson talks a lot about how, his visit to Phoenix to see one of their crisis centers really perhaps sold you on doing this work here in Douglas County. And so I think it's important to sort of recognize their effort and engagement in this process as we move forward and how they're going to help continue to partner with us to identify what these next steps are to get us open and operational. I don't know, Dr. Carson, if you want to say a few words, if you want to come up to the microphone over here.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. And I can't really go beyond what was just said to you by the three that I think. What I would say though, beyond what they said is, for whatever reason, Douglas County is very forward moving in this. What occurred here in 2018 is now being mimicked across the country, and communities are just starting where you were in 2017, 2018. The process, as complicated and as difficult as it has been, has outstripped and outrun regulation, licensure, payers, and yet it is a model of collaboration between the providers in this community, Burt Nash, LMH, the county, the state. I mean, it has really been a journey, having seen many of these journeys, of real collaboration. And I think that's one of the strengths of this. I think that the leadership and the vision of the county to not just bring this thing into the harbor before it's ready to be brought in is actually courage. And I think that everyone should be congratulated. I think when you look at that building, you see something that I can tell you with my experience, you should see across the country. But you are just way ahead of that. So congratulations to everybody. And it's been just a joy to be involved with.
Appreciate that, Dr. Carson. I think part of what Dr. Carson mentioned in some of our work as we've been reflecting on getting ready for this presentation just really is how really cutting edge this work is. I think sometimes when you're stuck in the details of everything that's happening on an everyday basis, I don't step back and reflect how much progress we've made as a community in this space and how visionary leadership was in this community several years back to endeavor to do something without necessarily a complete path and plan and an exact articulate goal as to what was in mind and to kind of bravely move into that space. I think we still are in that space as to how we evolve and how do we get this center to be the best crisis center it can be for Douglas County. It has certainly evolved under that. And I think, we are outstripping really what is being done in the region for certain, and definitely what's being done nationally in terms of what resources we can have to put this together. So while I know there's a lot of excitement and desire to say, today's the day of the first patient, I continue to sort of ask for the community's patience and our partners who really are so eager to have this vital piece of our crisis system together as we really make sure that we are doing our due diligence and we're putting all those pieces together so that we have a true operational, successful crisis center from day one. Bob, Dr. Thompson, did I miss anything we want to talk about? I do know that my hope is I'm interested in commissioners' feedback at this point. We know we need to bring these updates back to you on a more frequent basis than what we've have done over the summer. Clearly, some of the work about the switch in licensure has distracted us from some pieces of work that could have gotten done, should have gotten done, and some updates that should have been given to the commission and should have been given to the public. We're resolved to increase that communication and that discussion here at the commission level. And, you know, I'll make that my charge that we'll be back to you on a pretty frequent basis as to where we're at.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Dr. Carson, also for being here. I really appreciate this sort of summation of the history of where we've been and how we got here, where we're at, and where we're planning to go, and working hard to do that in the most successful way. So I just want to acknowledge, you know, something stood out to me, a couple of things, but Dr. Thompson, I really appreciate you talking about how that liaisoning work is already happening, that you and your staff are responding to the emergency room in regular communication with Burt Nash Services about making those connections already. And I think that's really critical foundation building. So I want to acknowledge and appreciate that. And maybe some of Dr. Carson's comments also just made me think about how so I identify as a community organizer and advocate sort of first before I ever thought to run for public office, and became an elected official and a funder. And in that community organizing world, I remember a friend of mine once telling me that movement building and real lasting change has to happen at the speed of trust building, and really being able to trust our partners and that relationship building that has a foundation of trust in order to make a movement that is lasting and to make change that is really impactful. So that stands out to me from what I've heard during this presentation and how we're at. And I think it's a affirming thought for me about, you know, why we are walking carefully and we are walking intentionally in this path to really get it as right as we can from the get-go. So I appreciate that. I think that most of my kind of questions from having read through the presentation ahead of time have been answered by your discussion. More might come to the surface, but those are my initial thoughts. I wonder if commissioners have other questions.
Just want to call out that, you know, we're building an ecosystem here out of services that have traditionally been siloed. And that's something that Douglas County service providers are especially good at, but that doesn't mean it's easy. It's incredibly hard work and takes some time to get it right. And also working within like a state licensure that is working hard to move out of silos also. So there are just some intrinsic difficulties with it. We have amazingly dedicated people who are working towards these goals and working through this. I do have a couple of questions when we, and one of them is about the licensure, you know, with Crisis Intervention Center versus private psychiatric hospital. And we've had a list of things that both allow, but it's my understanding that the private psychiatric hospital it's a stopgap that we're being allowed to function under, but the intention is to move to a licensure of Crisis Intervention Center. So are there things that are not allowed under one system or the other, or what makes that Crisis Intervention Center a better fit? Or are we just hoping that the state will find one silo that fits all of the models we would like to do?
That's a good question. And they both allow the same kinds of things. There's a few minor differences. And it was presented to us as a stopgap, a temporary license until the crisis center license becomes available. Some of the increased requirements of the private psychiatric hospital license can be put off for a while. And so if the crisis center license becomes available sooner, then it's a good idea to switch to that. If it takes a long enough time for the crisis center license to come online, or it seems like it's going to be indefinitely put off, then it's better for us to make those changes that are required for the private psychiatric hospital license. There may be some small modifications to the building, for example, some modifications to some of the policies or procedures. We have to have a medical staff if we're a private psychiatric hospital. We don't have to have a medical staff if we're not It's not really necessary from an operational standpoint. We have like 5 or 6 medical providers, so you don't have to have, it's not the same as LMH that has all of these medical providers to organize in that kind of way. What I like to say is that we're learning and growing at every step here. And so this will be something that we continue to look at over time. So when it becomes clear either that we need to make those changes that a private psychiatric hospital license requires, we'll make those changes. If it seems like, oh, the crisis center license is coming online, then we'll go that direction at that point. But really what I tell my team and the leadership team that's been here with us for a long time is that every day we're going to be learning. We're going to try things. This is the first facility that is taking involuntary patients in this way in Kansas. Right now I have patients that go to the emergency room, but psychiatric hospitals won't take them because they say they're too aggressive. And so we'll take those patients. But there are models for how to do that. Dr. Carson's team are experts in those models, but how does that look in Kansas and in Lawrence and Douglas County? So we're going to have this learning perspective about everything we're doing and including a license.
So one of the things that will also unfold is, though it's important to look at the ecosystem of the services that are provided, it also has to do with our funding streams and how the crisis center gets paid for in a sustainable way. And so some of those pieces, unfortunately, are also still unfolding. So that's one of the reasons that we can't quite be at a functioning place yet is that those pieces, as they come into play, will also have a lot of impact on how we open and how we stay open and are able to fund this for a long period of time. Well,
I appreciate that comment, Commissioner Willie, and you're absolutely right. We didn't focus a lot on funding on this presentation today, but the funding model for how this center will operate and be funded has done a complete 180 in our planning model on how everything has come together. The change of CCBHC funding coming to Burt Nash to be able to support these services in the community is something that we did not fully know we were going to have, I don't know, 6 months ago, 7 months ago. And in addition to that, the funding that we've been able to secure from the state of Kansas in terms of supporting the center. So there's a lot evolving in terms of how the funding model comes together and how different sources of funded are used, because as commissioners know, the sales tax that was voted on to support this funds not only the operations of the center, but funds all the work on that slide that we just showed about that crisis system, or funds a substantial part of it. So funds that, if they're not needed at the crisis center to do that work, can be used in the community. And as we know, there are plenty of needs in the community as to how we approach that and how we fund that work.
And I just want to give kudos also to Dr. Thompson on that work. We are still finalizing that contract, but it is about 4 times what we had originally envisioned because of Dr. Thompson's leadership, because of Burt Nash, LMH, and the story we have put together here and the project and people's belief in what we have to offer and how it compares to the rest of the state of Kansas. So again, kudos to all of our partners in that work.
This is Commissioner Reed. I just want to piggyback off of Commissioner Willie's question and then your answer, Dr. Thompson, about the license and the different types of facilities that exist in Kansas. And I just wonder, given sort of recent news on a statewide level, if you can take a moment to clarify differences between facilities when it comes to competency evaluations and restorations, whether or not that is something that is included in the regulations or licensure around a psychiatric hospital. There's been recent news about the overwhelmed state psychiatric hospitals. And so I think that some folks might naturally have a question and wonder if our local Douglas County Treatment and Recovery Center is going to function in some of those same capacities. Can you speak a little bit to that?
I'll give you a short answer and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues here. But neither the private psychiatric hospital regulations nor the crisis center regulations say you can or can't do that kind of work.
And I would say, yeah, competency restoration is a whole other kettle of fish. And Patrick Schmitz has been working closely at the state level on some of those conversations. I know, initial things were passed. I hope that that's not the end of where the state looks to go to fund and support competency work. So I think there's, like so many things we're talking about tonight, more to come. And, I think we will continue to advocate along with the, particularly the sheriff at the statewide level for enhanced support, financial support and resources from the state for competency restoration.
Yeah,
think
thank
one
you.
of-
I figured the answer was essentially still unfolding TBD.
But
Sort of, Bob, do you have some?
Well, I just,
additional-
again, on all of the components on that slide, two components that aren't specifically on that slide that Bert Nash is in the process of implementing. One is an assertive community treatment team, and the other is assisted outpatient treatment. Now, that's not going to address competency restoration in the jail, but what that can address is helping people to avoid declining in the community till they get to the point where they wind up in they wind up in jail. And so, the ability of a person who is on assertive community treatment or as part of assisted outpatient treatment is going to be able to, I think, Dr. Thompson, I don't know if you agree, that would be a person in the community that will really benefit from being able to come to the crisis center regardless of their level of acuity so that we can prevent things escalating to the point or declining to the point where they would wind up in jail.
Right. We'll offer the police a viable alternative to driving somebody that's in distress to jail. I called the police this morning while I was getting coffee because there was a gentleman that was disturbed and yelling in the street and stopping traffic. Right now, they have to take him either to the emergency room or to jail. But once we open, then we're happy to serve that person. And if we can help them get calmed down, whatever they need, provide that for them, then that person won't go to jail. They won't have that risk in the first place.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Reed again. I appreciate both of your points there, and that I really speaks to the notion that the work we have, that Douglas County has visioned and is working to implement through this TRC and the larger crisis system is one that has an eye towards prevention and harm reduction and minimizing the need for competency restoration, especially in custody. So I appreciate that. I just know it's been local news, and I think that I've heard some conversations in the community that wonder that already, and they're kind of linking the two. So I think it's important for us to discuss. One other question I have come up was, we've talked a lot about the whole crisis system, and that this is the TRC is one piece of that, and that we really are working to create something that is holistic and there's continuity in the communication and the functions of all of those different parts of the system. So I know Bob and I have had a little bit of a conversation about this so far, but it's been a while. I just wonder what, among all the other things that you're juggling and working to navigate and figure out, what kind of discussions have there been had about what crisis system governance, as it was in the, titled in the slides, might look like? What kind of community-wide stakeholder coordination of not just governing one piece of it, but governing how all of those pieces work together. I just wonder what kind of where those conversations lie today.
So I think we've started those conversations. I think one of the most recent examples of that was at last month's Criminal Justice Coordinating Council meeting, where Dr. Balfour from Connections and Dr. Ken Minkoff from Massachusetts came and gave an overview of the crisis system roadmap. I remember sitting in a Criminal Justice Coordinating Council meeting about a year ago when we were talking and presenting the Crisis Now approach to addressing crisis systems. I think it was Commissioner Portillo asked the question. She said, is there a blueprint or a roadmap or sort of best practice standards on this that you're following? And the answer to that moment was no, we're following what's evolving. But I think that roadmap really provides a blueprint. So the question is, how does this evolve? How do these conversations evolve? How do we assemble the same type of council that has a broader table of stakeholders? So law enforcement and EMS must be at the table. all the municipalities need to be at the table. You know, the value is that a 24/7 behavioral health crisis system is essential to public health and safety as our emergency medical and fire and law enforcement response is. So how are we going to put all of the pieces together? That's a big question. And who needs to be a part of the decision-making process of governance, financial management, and accountability? There probably needs to be, you know, a table or a collection of tables assembled. So this is a good time and a good opportunity to start really thinking about that and engaging. I know we've started having conversations with police chief, with all the police chiefs actually recently, because the mobile response team needs to also be blended effectively with co-responder. We can't have mobile teams that are walking into situations that are unsafe. So how do we make sure and ensure that the mobile team that's online from 8 in the morning to 2 a.m. is supported by law enforcement or EMS when that need arises? That integration is essential. And the challenges of figuring out how to evolve so that we can fund that 24/7 in a community of our size is also a substantial challenge. So these are courageous conversations we're going to have to step into, and they need to be thoughtfully organized.
It's also been a topic in the early adopter learning community that we're a part of. And so those communities include, if I remember right, Iowa City, Grand Rapids, Austin, and Miami. And these are all cutting edge programs, but none of them have that overarching oversight of a crisis psychiatric system. And so we have this benefit of Dr. Balfour and Dr. Minkoff, who are nationally recognized experts in this area, but also to explore together with them as each of us are looking, what could that look like in our particular situation?
Thank you. Commissioner Kelly?
I want to thank you for the update, and especially to just share that some of the slides at the beginning reminded me that ideas and aspirations are really pretty easy, right? And I've been really fortunate to be involved in a couple of projects that started as ideas, you know, started in those visioning sessions and were dots on a page, and this is what we could do. And even, you know, let's draw some pictures of what the space might look like or what the programming might look like. And I appreciate how easy that is to do, and then how hard it is to operationalize those ideas. And I can't, well, I was gonna say I can't imagine, but I've done some projects like this. So a little bit, I can imagine what it's like working with multiple partners, trying to align services. And especially what struck me in your presentation is how, I think Dr. Carson said, how far out on the edge that you are, because I'm going to guess that sometimes when you're out on the edge there and suddenly we don't have regulations and we've had to, maybe we need to back up and wait for them to be created, right? And we want to say, well, I can see over there where I'm trying to go. That's my aspiration. And gosh darn it, we just need to build a bridge to get over there, right? But we're out of lumber. We're out of rope. You know, is it a national labor shortage that we've been under? Oh, wait, there's guidelines that have changed on how we build this bridge to make sure it's safe for everyone. Yeah, I assume they are. And I don't want to carry this metaphor too far, but I really do appreciate and hope we don't lose sight that we need to make sure that bridge is safe. You know, we need to make sure that as we go across it, that it's solid. And so I appreciate the time that's taken, and the pressure is tremendous. I'm sure the pressure is tremendous from within your organizations because they work every day with the people who need these services. You wouldn't, there's no reason you'd be dragging your feet if you didn't have to, but you want to make sure that we're providing the right services at the right time, every time, and that it's consistent. So I appreciate that lens that was part of that presentation. My question to you, Dr. Thompson, is really a pretty open one. As you think about getting licensure and moving forward towards opening, are there things that you're uncovering like, oh, wow, here's some other hurdles that we need to jump as we get closer to opening.
I would say that the hurdles are all, I ran hurdles in like 8th grade. I'm not a particularly athletic hurdler. And I ran the low hurdles. And this is, at this point, it's a low hurdle race, but there are a lot of low hurdles. And so the big areas have been, I think, mostly handled, but there are a number of things that are things that we need to deal with and integrate and handle. And as you were talking about the process of, encountering, say, oh, you don't have a license, there's not a licensure path. It's actually the process that we'll go through when we work with the patients that come to us, because usually there won't be a particular path. And we'll need to use our clinical experience and judgment, our creativity, and our human connection with the person in front of us. And what allows us to do that is that we have to be in a comfortable space ourselves to be able to do that kind of work. It's a paradox of the nervous system that you have to feel safe in order to take risks. And so I think that the hurdles that are in front of us are really hurdles also to help the providers and the staff in the facility to feel safe, comfortable, and confident. Because when we are, then we can really reach to what that patient in front of us needs.
Any other questions lingering from commissioners? Okay, I am gonna suggest that we take a 5-minute break before we open this up for public comment. We've been going for a while now since our work session, so we'll reconvene at 7:35. I'm gonna pull us back together. Hope everybody had a chance to stretch their legs. All right, we are re-adjourned. That's not really the right word, is it? Reconvened, thank you. Opposite. And at this point, we're gonna go ahead and open up public comment for this agenda item. So just as a reminder, all public comment is limited to 3 minutes. Please plan to state your name and Douglas County residence for the record. Go right ahead and please press that button on the microphone. You'll see the green light and then you're good to go.
All right. Hey, can you hear me? Hi.
Make sure you speak right into the
I
microphone
can try to speak right into.
and you can pick it up if you need to.
All right. My name is Irving Koo. I am a recent, I guess, immigrant into Douglas County. I had lived in Arkansas since 1984, and I was a psychiatrist there up until I retired about 3 months ago. I worked at the VA for 20 years, and I was the head of the Little Rock mental health program at the Little Rock VA hospital. And after that, for 4 years, I was the head of the, I was chief mental health officer over 8 hospitals in their mental health programs. And I'm saying this as a prelude because, not to talk about myself, but what you're talking about is extremely exciting. This is great. I can't say how many things I have seen, great ideas die over the years, and to think that this was developed 6 years ago and it's still being pushed into fruition at this point is really a wonderful thing. I'm here partly to just be able to throw anything that I can do to help. I'm willing to do so. And interestingly enough, I was looking for things to do after retirement. I volunteered for the Citizen Review Board here with the Douglas County Court, so I'm training for that. But I have a part-time job now as a Joint Commission surveyor for psychiatric hospitals. So any particular expertise that I might be able to lend with that as I take my journey into learning to be a Joint Commission surveyor. I'm more than willing to be a resource. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kevin. Does anybody else like to provide public comment?
Good evening. My name's Ashley Bloom. I'm a family physician in East Lawrence. I work with LMH Health, and I can attest to the real need and energy for this type of crisis and behavioral health ecosystem that we're discussing. I see it every day in my practice, caring for multiple generations of the same family within our community, and the way that having the treatment and recovery center will provide that patient first care for people, the type of care that they need it in the right place at the right time. And I feel very confident that Dr. George Thompson and the team that he is building is going to provide that for my patients. I can't wait for the moment when it opens to be able to tell my patients, you're experiencing crisis. I know exactly where to go. I know that you're going to be cared for the way that I would care for you, the way that I would want to be cared for myself. And so I am just really grateful for all the work that's gone into bringing us to this point and to be a part of this community in providing this care.
Thank you, Dr. Bloom. Would anybody else like to provide public comment?
Hello, Steve Jacob again. That was a great presentation. I learned a lot, and this is going to be a great asset to the community. But the libertarian in me is a pessimist. We got no answers on when we're opening. I'm hoping it's 2023, but there's no guarantee from what I'm hearing. I'm going to see a lot of people that could be here in this facility in tents this winter. And I'm disappointed in that. But, and also it hasn't come up, it never did come up. I'm worried about staffing because as we see with the homeless shelter, there's plenty of open beds that they can't fill because of staffing. I'm concerned that this may very well happen for this place. I hope not, but I can already tell there's a massive amount of hiring that needs to go on and continue to go on with this facility. And I'm hoping they can keep it fully staffed, but as we all know, that's going to be a problem right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here that would like to provide public comment?
Hello, Patrick Schmitz, Burt Nash, and I am a Lawrence resident. Thank you for the opportunity to just present real briefly, and that's my comments will be very brief, a little walk down memory lane. In January and February of 2017, I started the journey of earning the position I currently hold. At some point during that journey, I met with County Administrator Weinog and then Commissioner Nancy Thelman for their opportunity to interview me and for them to make something very clear to me, that while the Burt Nash Center would have an important role in the crisis center yet to be built, it was their vision and hope that the project would be a collaborative one among several community organizations and not just one. I remember telling them that I was good with that because that's the same arrangement I had developed in Iowa when we started the crisis center within our 7 county regions. I am happy to say that that crisis remains open and viable today after 7 years of operation. I am proud to stand up here today on the brink of being ready to open the Douglas County Treatment and Recovery Center. Thank you, Douglas County leaders and administration, for having the vision, supporting it, and leading the way. Thank you to our fellow Douglas County citizens for believing in the idea of a locally run and operated crisis intervention center. Thank you, Dr. Thompson and your team for your work in bringing the dream alive. The Burt Nash Center is honored to play a key role in bringing these desperately needed services to our community through the Douglas County Treatment and Recovery Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else here like to provide public comment? Okay, not seeing any head nods or hands, so we'll just double check if anybody has raised their hand on Zoom. Okay, thanks for checking. Close public comment and bring this back for discussion. Commissioners, I'll throw it to you first. Anybody who wants to jump in?
I'll jump in. Patrick Schmitz, do you mind stepping back up to answer just a little bit about the CCBHC process and what that brings to the county as an opportunity? Is that something you're prepared to kind of help inform us about?
I might need to phone a friend for this, and that friend is Stephen O'Neill. But go ahead and ask some questions and I will happily answer to my best ability.
So it's a certification that is not well known except of those of us that have been asking you about this. And you can just kind of for the rest of the public,
Sure.
what it is, what it means, and
Yep.
and how important that is to this process.
Sure. So the CCBHC, which is the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics, was an idea started 10 to 12 years ago at the federal level. I recall about 10 years ago spending a few days in the Capitol advocating for the passage of the Excellence in Mental Health Act. And the idea behind that was to do a significant system change and improvement for community mental health services across our nation. It started out with some demonstration states. I think there was 8 to begin with, and then they added some additional ones. And then SAMHSA added what they called expansion grants, where an organization could go ahead and apply for a grant of up to $4 million, if I'm not mistaken. Was that right? Yeah, $4 million. And that they could use that to help them get ready to become a CCBHC. The challenge with that for those that were outside of a demonstration state, if they existed within a state that didn't recognize them in the payment model following the ending of the grant, then those projects were at risk of losing all that work they had done. Thankfully, in Kansas, in the legislature in 2021, the Kansas legislature, along with advocates, passed the CCBHC Act. There's a real title for it, essentially being the first state in the nation to implement the CCBHC model statewide and put in the payment model to support it ongoing. As Representative Landwehr, who helped champion this, said, this is the most significant change in the mental health system in over 30 years in Kansas. This allows us to bring in additional funding for a variety of projects, a variety of services. It helps us address the staffing shortages through pay increases. It helps us really beef up the accountability and the oversight of what we do. Once you become certified, there's a lot of expectations that you build capacity over the course of time. One of the core services that there are a set of services you're required to provide directly as a CCBHC, and there are some that you can, what you call DCO, which is designated collaborating organization. Thank you, Stephen. See, I didn't have to call you, but got the assist. Crisis services are one that must be provided by the CCBHC. As a result, we were able to take some of the cost of operating the TRC and drop it within our model to help provide funding. And that was, I don't know who mentioned earlier, a kind of a change about 6 months ago. I think it was you, Sarah, 6 to 8 months ago. So we were able to bring now, because of the CCBHC status that Burton Ash was awarded in July, able to bring some more stable funding for the project to the tune of approximately $2.9 million annualized. So that's a big significant thing. There's a lot more about CCBHCs, and I think we plan on coming back later this year or early next year to talk more about that, the broader picture of what it will bring to our community.
And specifically in context of the county budget and the support that we provide for Burton Ash, we had a presentation this summer about that as those initial things were happening. And I think our plan is to talk early next year about now, what does that mean for how the county funding interacts with Burton Nash budget?
It does allow us to bring in more federal funding so that we have an opportunity here in Douglas County to do something different with the current designated funding, not everything, but some things. And how do we create new things and stretch the county dollar even further? It's a significant amount of money that we're bringing in as a result of this, not just for this project, but for a lot of other things.
Thank you. And thank you for the work that it took to get there.
Thank you.
There's a question from the public about staffing, and Dr. Thompson, I know you've hired a lot of great people, so I thought you might want to take an opportunity to sort of talk about your great team and to this mic, I think.
Yes, we've hired about 39 people so far, and there'll be more that can come from Burton Nash. So over 50. We have the support teams from LMH and Burton Nash, over 70 people from there. One of the things that's really remarkable is how people come. So our first nurse that we hired had been looking at the LMH and Burton Nash websites every week for a year because she read about this project in the paper and was very eager to join us. And so the very first day that we posted a nurse position on the LMH site, we got our first application. And this is a nurse that started off her career as a case manager at Burton Nash. She got a bachelor's in social work. And then she went back and was a nurse, and she was a nurse in the emergency room at LMH. And then she had been working at Strawberry Hill, the psychiatric facility run by KU in Kansas City, Kansas. And so a highly qualified person, a person that represents our community in all aspects of this project. I've had 4 psychiatrists call and say, I want to work with you. Like, if you ever do psychiatric hiring, that's unheard of. That doesn't happen. Dr. Koo just volunteered to help us out, I think for free, if I heard him right. And I'm got to check with somebody else and make sure I'm not hearing things. But that's been the story of the whole project. There are leaders of various organizations that refer their mentors to work for us. And I know in the recent 2-week period, we had hired 8 new staff. And so I keep my fingers crossed that that will keep going. But this is such a needed project and an exciting project that it's really attracting people to come and work for us because they want to be part of creating something that's new and cutting edge here in Douglas County. And so I think it's thanks to this vision that was created by people long before me. It actually attracted me. Sarah mentioned Jeanette Kirkpatrick called me in November of 2020, 2 years ago, and said, I have this project I'm working on. Would you be interested in participating? I said, nope. She said, well, would you talk to me? I said, I'll always talk to you. I've worked at LMH doing consults for 11 years. And I started doing some consultation for a few hours a week. But it was in April of 2021 that when I went to visit the Urgent Psychiatric Center run by Connections in Arizona, that I could see what the potential was for this community. Somebody could walk into our center 24/7 and get help they need. They could come in and get started on medication the same day. Right now, it takes 8 weeks, 12 weeks. I don't know how long for Dr. Bloom's patients to get on medication. I think she's told me somewhere around that if they're just going in to see somebody. And that's the model that we learned in Phoenix. So I said to Jeanette at the end of the day, I think this had been her secret plan all along, was to get me to go to Phoenix and then I would know what was happening. I said, hey, Jeanette, I think I want to be the medical director of this thing. And so it reminded me a little of the Norelco commercial from many years ago. You know, I liked the shaver so much I bought the company. But that was really my experience of seeing Connections in their model, that I just had to be a part of it. It wasn't on my list of things to do. It wasn't part of my career plan. So I took a right turn and I joined up. And that's the story with a number of people.
This is Commissioner Reed. I really appreciate the conversation, and thank you, Commissioner Kelly, for following up on that comment about staffing. And I think it's a valid concern, and I am proud to to hear and what I've been hearing in recent weeks and months is that just what Dr. Thompson shared, that folks are really excited to join this team and be a part of this project. So I'm happy about that. And I know that that is, it's a privilege for us to be in that position and something we should be proud of right now in these circumstances, because care workers are hard to come by across the nation, across this community and other places and other types of care work, everything from direct advocacy to medically licensed folks like nurses and doctors and psychiatrists. And so I think there is a real sort of, in my opinion, national crisis around care workforce. So I am happy, and it gives me a good sense of confidence that we aren't necessarily experiencing that piece of it. And so we are building a strong team, and that work is starting to already happen and being done in practice even before the doors of this particular center are open. I'm grateful for all of the intentional work of our county staff and our county administrator and Bob Transky, our director of behavioral health projects, because as we've heard this evening, the evolution of this has been, a lot has happened, a lot has changed. A lot of curveballs got thrown our way. A lot of things were unknown when the original visioning and conceptualizing of all of these things happened. And so the tenacity that I believe that requires to stay committed to the vision, and what the voters of Douglas County gave a very clear directive to the county commission to build and create for this community. And our staff has really been dedicated to that and helping really lead the way and convening all of the community partners. And I appreciate, Patrick, your anecdote about 5 years ago, and that former Commissioner Thelman and former County Administrator Craig Weinog were from the get-go talking about collaboration and the need to build those relationships, build trust amongst partners, and realize what that kind of integrated care could look like, with the understanding that it required stronger relationships and working out different things along the way to get there. So I'm really proud of that progress. And at the same time, I also have pretty regular conversations with folks in the community who are wondering why this isn't open yet, who are worried about what escalating crises they see in our community, and that there's a piece of the puzzle that we don't have in place yet entirely. And I appreciate that. Those concerns are valid. I have them too. And I want us to get it right. And that is what really matters to me, is that I do not want us to, as a whole community, hastily work to open doors to a facility that isn't quite ready and hasn't figured out all of the sort of nooks and crannies of what it's going to mean to provide those services in reality on a day-to-day basis. So, and Sarah, I also appreciate the acknowledgement that you all will be coming back to us with more frequent updates and keeping that conversation more front and center for the public, as we understand that there's significant interest in that, and that this is a community-driven vision. It's a mandate from our community, and so we absolutely, I think I can speak confidently for the commission that we absolutely understand that it is our duty to keep that conversation alive in the public, to keep answering the questions that we're hearing from people and addressing those concerns and taking into consideration the things we don't yet know that we need to figure out in order to do this the right way.
I don't have a whole lot more to add. I will say that and it's been said a number of times before, like the complexity of the system, the number of partners. I mean, I hear how many people Dr. Thompson is working with, Bert Nash, LMH, Douglas County. There's just so many people in this system. And I think about those other systems where Douglas County has been out in front of it. So let's take 988, for example. Douglas County funded 988 before the state was ready for it because we felt like it was so important to get that done. We had to create that infrastructure. We're lucky to have great partners who are able to do that. In some ways, I feel like this is pushing our limitations too. That when I think about change, and this is a change for our community, this is something new. There are two things I think that limit change, and one is readiness and the other is trust. You know, we can only go as far as we are ready to. We may have an idea for change that we could get to, but if we're not ready, if we have to kind of wait that time, if we're exhausted, if we haven't had enough meetings and enough conversations, we can't move forward. And we can't move forward if we don't have trust. So trust amongst organizations. And I think we have those things. I think we're building those things, but they take time. And I understand the community's desire to have this open the minute the sales tax passed and we started collecting fees. And I get that because we're in a society that expects instant gratification. You know, if you can get a meal for under $10 by driving through or even have it delivered to your door, why can't I have that work here? But that takes work and time and trust and readiness. And I appreciate all the people who are working to make sure that trust in place and that readiness is in place, because this is a huge change and the right change for our community. So I'm pretty excited about it and pretty appreciative of all the work that's been done to get us to where we are today.
Just want to say that all of the people and the teams and the organizations that are in this mix, every one of them is needed. We have fantastic voices that are speaking into this space. And just that though there's still some uncharted waters between here and the goal that we have, just everyone staying engaged and playing their role, we'll see us successfully there. And we're very excited for the vision to come to fruition.
And I'm sorry, just to add one more thing, but I think it's really important for our community to hear and not accept the narrative that if the TRC is not open, there are not services for those who are in crisis. We do have services for those who are in crisis now. And we need to make sure that I hear that sometimes out there as what is this person to do if the TRC isn't open? And that's not true. LMH and Burt Nash are doing a great job in our community of providing those services. You can call 988. So I want to make sure that narrative doesn't leave this space that because we're not open, we don't have services for people. We do have services for people.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Nope, I appreciate it. Well, thank you all again. I appreciate Dr. Thompson and Bob for their presentation and everybody who joined us to listen and provide comment. We really appreciate your interest and please stay in conversation with us. Please let us know your feedback or more questions that might bubble to the surface beyond this evening's meeting. So thank you all for being here. And just as a reminder for anybody in the public who maybe doesn't have the agenda in front of them, this was an agenda item that is just for informational purposes only. No action is being taken this evening. So with that, we will move on to our final regular agenda item. Sarah, would you like to introduce our guests for that?
Yes, thank you, commissioners. The next item is on an overview of the Baldwin Rural Housing District, and I really appreciate that City Manager Glenn Rodden and Mayor Semino have stayed here for this conversation today. And I apologize for the late hour. This is the first rural housing incentive district that we've had in Douglas County, and really Baldwin is really our only community that really is eligible for it. So I thought it would be helpful for Glenn to give us an overview of what the district is and does, and we might have some questions. And while I don't believe the county is required to consent to, or a vote is needed on behalf of the commission, it does involve quite a bit of substantial work on the part of our entire team here related to taxation and tax roll here in Douglas County with the appraiser, the treasurer, the clerk, the administration. are all engaged in that process. So I just thought it would be helpful for all of us to get an overview and then talk. I think we've got more to talk about how the process goes. So are you able to share the screen there? Yep, at the bottom. Robin can help. Here we go.
I don't know why it's.
There.
There. We did it? There we go. Okay.
All right, thank you. All right. Well, without further ado, okay. Yes, I'm Glenn Rodden, City Administrator of Baldwin City, and this is Ccbhc. Need me to talk into the microphone while I'm at it here. It's I got like technical stuff here. We don't have this at our meetings, so not used to it. But anyway, yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to look at this in the pack, and I could go through the whole thing if you want me to. Just real briefly, it isn't really all that complicated. To actually jump through all the hoops to create a rural housing incentive district is very complicated, as we're finding out. We're not to the end of the process yet, and that's why we're here today. But this is just real basic information about what the rural housing incentive district is. Like the slide says, it was actually created back in 1998. We were not eligible until a couple of years ago because of the population of the county, and that was changed here recently. The state legislature decided to loosen up the requirements. So now we do, as a city of 5,000 in Douglas County, we do qualify as under the rural heading for rural housing incentive district. So, okay, how do we get this to roll forward here? Is there is it just, yep. Oh, there we go. So what it is, I mean, in a nutshell, what I could say right off the bat about rural housing incentive district is that if you understand what a TIF district is, a tax increment financing, which is usually done for commercial or other types, sometimes industrial, whatever, it works the same way, because what you're dealing with is property tax. And the land that we're talking about now is vacant land, typically, it's taxed at agricultural rates or something like that. And so it's taxed very low. There's nothing on it right now. So that tax increment actually goes where it's going right now to all the three taxing districts. Once you begin to build on it, of course, it increases in value. So what's happening then is you take the increment, and that's the part with the TIF, and you apply that back to development of the land. This is basically what it comes down to, is a way to develop land for housing by making the growth pay for itself. So this is a little actually behind us. It's up to 15 years for the project. I believe you can go up to 20 years now in a rural housing incentive district. So, but anyway, that's it. What it's doing is taking the tax money that would have gone to the taxing bodies and putting that back in, and it's eligible then to reimburse the developer for their expenses. So you come up with an development agreement and all those kinds of things, which we've been doing that. We have two on the board right now. We've been approached by two developers. One is in the Heritage subdivision, which is east of town, and the other is in our Fire Tree, which is north of town, and they both want to develop housing.
So what you do is you jump through a lot of, you have to create an ordinance that gets this rolling, and there's resolutions to pass, and there's a development agreements to each one of these. What it comes down to then is once you enter into these development agreements, you specify what is eligible to be reimbursed under the rural housing incentive district. So that's that. Once they put in all the infrastructure, which is basically what you're incentivizing, then they can come back and get reimbursed for that. So it sounds really daunting and complicated. I didn't really understand when I first encountered this whole thing, but that's really all it is. So you understand how a TIF works and how that money is captured and then reimbursed, and then after your district is paid off, then it just ends. So it can be up to 20 years, but if they develop in a shorter amount of time, which we anticipate they would, then it just ends at that point. So you're no longer reimbursing. And so everything goes back on the tax rolls at that point. So that's kind of an overview of how you do all this thing. And this is like a real thumbnail sketch. The question is, why would you do this? And in Baldwin City, it's easy for us. We began talking about doing a rural housing incentive district a couple of years ago. We approached our school district about it, and they didn't have any objections to it. We also have the neighborhood revitalization, which we just renewed. We had that 5 years ago. We just renewed it for another 5 years. For us, the answer is really simple. We have not seen a lot of housing development in Baldwin City for a long time. So we've asked a lot of people who develop housing why that's not happening. And they say, well, it's because of the cost. It costs as much to develop home sites in Baldwin City as it does anywhere else in the county, including Lawrence. So, or even in Johnson County in some cases. So their question is, why would I come to Baldwin City? You're a lot smaller. So okay, all right. So we have to provide incentives. So we tried the neighborhood revitalization. We had a little success with that. That's done very well. But we haven't had housing development. We haven't like a 20, 30, 40, 50 home development in probably about 20 years now. Last one was Fire Tree in the early 2000s. Recession hit about 2008, 9, and we haven't had really anything since. The flip side of this is every day the Chamber of Commerce or somebody at the city is approached by somebody saying, I'd love to buy it or rent a home in Baldwin City. What do we got? And there's nothing. Mayor Semino is in the real estate business, title company there. He can tell you even more than I do. Any typical day, we have 4 or 5 homes on the market to sell. And they go very quickly. Most of the time people compete for them. They'll actually get more money than they're even asking for. So we know there's a demand for all this. We started about this 2 years ago, and then Panasonic happens. Just 20, 30 minutes away, we're getting a huge facility that's going to employ off the bat 4,000 new workers. And some of those people are going to want to live in Baldwin City. Some are going to want to live in Lawrence. Some are going to use Eura, and some in Johnson County, wherever. Not everybody's going to want to live in Baldwin, but that's going to accelerate our need for housing even more as people want to look at Baldwin City and come and live in a smaller town. So we know that growth is happening. We know it's out there, and we need a way to build homes, and we need to do it fairly quickly. So that's sort of our plan of attack right now, is to use this tool, which was not available to us a couple of years ago, to sort of spark the housing developments we need so we can build 20, 30, 40 homes at a time and get them on the market. We know that our school census is slightly down. It has been for a little bit. So this is another way to get, we're looking basically for the same market you're looking at up here. We're looking at young families who, want a place to live, and, they want to raise their families. And some are going to want to come to Lawrence. Some will want to come again to Baldwin City. They're different environments to raise your family in. So that's our target. So although, like I said, this all looks really complicated, and in a way it is, this presentation was put together by Gilmore Bell. They're our bond counsel. So they guided us through this, and every step of the way they've been with us to make sure we do everything correctly on a legal basis. And they've done that so far. So we're kind of at the end, and I think the reason why we're here is because you have the ability, as well as the school district, to object to the rural housing incentive district, a 30-day window after we pass the last resolution. And then you have that 30-day opportunity in there to say, put the brakes on that, or, we're going to object to it. We're hoping you don't do that. But you do have the opportunity. So, all right, did that confuse everybody as much as possible there on that kind of whirlwind tour of what a RID is?
When I have an initial question, and it might be technical in nature,
Okay.
you mentioned that Baldwin has a Neighborhood Revitalization Act program over the entire city.
Right.
My assumption is, and so that program already rebates the housing cost increase to the property owner and takes that off the tax roll. So my assumption is these districts will not be in the NRA districts.
So they are, but you can't use both.
Okay,
Because
so
that's what your question-
I
yeah,
think
you
that
can't-
is,
You can't double it because actually it's impossible.
because it wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work.
right.
You can't financially do that. So
Okay.
that's one of the questions we get. So you have to make a choice where you're going to use the NRP or the RID. So
Okay.
that's the developer's choice to do.
And that might just be something that as you're working with our appraiser's office team,
Mhm.
you know, in terms of setting up the district and managing those properties as they
Right.
come through there, that we're gonna need your help and coordination on those pieces, because you're
Right.
far more familiar with what's in what for your
Right.
community than
Right.
our appraiser's staff might be.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I just highlight that that's an issue that
And
we're
I-
gonna need
and
to
I know
talk
our
about.
staff works with them constantly on that because that's an issue that comes up because you got people buying and selling property and they want to know whether they're taking advantage of that incentive or not. But that's a great question to start. You can't do both because obviously you're using the same dollars. So either go into the infrastructure or they're rebated back to the person. So there are two different methods though for funding housing. The NRP is basically for the homeowner who's buying a new home and they get the rebate for 5 years. So that goes to them. The RID is geared toward the developer because that's going to go to developer cost. So it depends on who you are. If you're a developer coming into a town and you want to build 30 homes, you're going to be attracted to the RID. But if you're a single you're just buying a single home somewhere in Baldwin City, you're going to apply for the neighborhood revitalization. That's probably what your choice would be. So we have both of those tools in our tool chest to bring out, which is great. The state legislature actually did that. We didn't expect that, but a pleasant surprise.
This is Commissioner Reed. Yeah, I had the same question as Sarah, so thank you for that. And to your response, I mean, since it is one's for developers and one's for homeowners, property owners,
Right.
which sometimes, property owner might be the builder, and so they might
It could,
choose
yeah.
that, but again,
It
an
could.
individual basis.
Yep.
So it doesn't seem that I mean, developers are always going to choose the RID because that's what benefits them. So it seems to me like basically kind of all the individual homes throughout Baldwin City that might turn over ownership, get renovated, updated and things like that will be taking advantage of the NRA, but any sort of new builds that's not just an owner build is likely to be taking advantage.
I would
of
think so.
this.
We'll see how that, it'll be interesting to see how that breaks down. Because actually a lot of people who take advantage of the NRP have actually been on the commercial side. They've done a lot of renovation or building. So because that's not limited to residential, that's open to industrial, commercial and everything. So we probably had an equal number of commercial applications on that, which would be good. Almost every problem we have in Baldwin City, if we're going to frame it as a problem, it all goes back to housing. We would have more retail if we had more housing. But it's a chicken and the egg thing as people come in and say, well, I don't want to put a new store in there because I don't see population growth. I don't see more houses. So we're going, okay, all right, but we don't get people to live because they don't. Okay. So we have to take the lead some way as a city and say, okay, we're going to incentivize this some way, somehow, and somehow move the needle. You're taking this a little bit on faith that people will invest in your community then because you're putting that incentive in front of them. But we got enough faith in our community. It will work out for us. And the NRP has been a good success for us. It really has.
Let me clarify just a little bit on that. So the NRP, essentially what you're going to see is the new subdivisions are going to be under the RID program. And so no new houses in that will be able to be under the NRP program. What we're seeing, and I think what we'll continue to see, is the renovation, fixing up dilapidated properties, different things like that. That will still incentivize that to make the community nicer, cleaner, and so on and so forth. It's probably what the NRP is going to do. And as Glenn alluded to, commercial is probably, we got a few commercial lots throughout Baldwin that are still available. They have some issues with them. That's why they're still available, but there are still some that are. And I think that's what we're going to see the NRP used for. But essentially all our single family housing right now is already in the NRP, or they're going to be part of new subdivisions because we just don't have anything available within our city limits. Even our in-growth areas are. And the other thing that is really good about this program for us is we need all kinds of housing. We've really made a concerted effort on the council to concentrate on affordable housing. In one of the subdivisions, they're going to have triplexes there, they're going to have townhouses there, and they're going to have single family houses there. And with this program, it will allow them to sell the lots at a cheaper market value than what you traditionally see in Lawrence or Kansas City or Gardner. Communities we often see that we are compared to as a smaller community. They will still be able to build that house, and it'll be a less affordable or more affordable house than what you would get in those other communities because of the lot side prices.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And that was a question I had, was just kind of what Baldwin City's goals in general, and what the type of zoning allows for in terms of the ability to really build up affordable housing and mixed income and mixed type of dwellings within those housing developments, so that it's not exclusively single family homes.
Commissioner Kelly, I'm looking at the district formation procedures, and it requires a housing needs analysis. Has that been completed? Has that been approved by the
It
Secretary of
has.
Commerce?
We had to submit that as part of the application for that, and we did a housing analysis, I think it was about a year ago, and we submitted that as part of. We're anticipating things I'd like, again, where I did not realize that RID was going to become available to us, but again, that's every question we have, problem we have goes back to housing. So we did a needs analysis and we updated as far as the package went. And then you have to actually show a very extensive spreadsheet as part of this application. That's how this would all cash flow when you do a RID over X amount of years or whatever. So that was also part of the creation of each one of the districts. So like I said, it's a very elaborate process to go through. And I've learned a lot about how to do this. I learned even more about housing than I ever thought I would know. But, you know, I think it's worth it. It really is. But the answer to your question is yes, we have to do needs analysis.
Okay. Yeah, and I would say when you have a proposed project and it comes back here, I mean, some of the questions that I'm going to ask is sort of like, what is the blend of housing that's being provided in it? What does that look like? Because it does have an impact on the county tax. And I think that's something to be considering.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, like the Heritage subdivision has a blend. The mayor was just talking about of duplexes, single family, and we just went through that. We annexed that property, we rezoned it, and we just went through the planning commission, and the city council just wrestled with that here this fall. The past couple of months have been doing that. So we're very aware we're short of everything. We're short of rentals. We're short of entry-level homes, middle level, everything we're short of in our community. And that's just because the market has just stalled over the past really 2 decades. So we need everything now, but we can't do that all now, unfortunately. But we're going to take this first step.
And in your talk with developers, do they think that this will create enough incentive? Because sometimes we hear in other parts of Douglas County that it doesn't create enough incentive to actually do the development of a certain size. You know, it has to be this big in order for me to make enough money.
Right. We've heard all those things, but yes, we actually have 2 development agreements already, one in Fire Tree and one in Heritage. As we went through the creation of this, we actually signed development agreements with them to actually do this. So they're already committed to doing it. They're waiting for the time period around, and they're going to be ready to roll once we get this approved and through. So that's already in the works, and I suspect there'll be more. One thing we didn't talk about is part of the RID that you can do is actually revitalizing your downtown. Also, you can build apartments or condos, whatever, above storefronts and things downtown. Nobody's applied for that yet, but that's a possibility to do that. We're now a Main Street community, So we're taking advantage of that. We think we'll have an historic district at some point. That takes a couple years to get through that process. And so this would be another part of that process also to help people revitalize their downtown. So there's many ways you can use the program.
To expand on that, one of the properties that is currently under a development agreement with us has been owned by the developer since 1992. So they've been sitting on this land for nearly 30 years, and this program actually brought them out to go ahead and develop that. Part of that development is there is a little bit of commercial, which we desperately need, but there is not commercial, but industrial area or one spot that is going to allow one of our current businesses to expand their business and build into that, then open up that building. So we're going to see a little bit of movement within Baldwin for some of these ancillary businesses that may be looking to the outer areas to support Panasonic or the intermodal for us down in that area.
I know we haven't taken public comment, but just a statement real quick. I would encourage you, Mayor Semino and Glenn, I know you've been in some of those discussions with that Panasonic task force that's working together.
Correct.
I would make sure and share this with them so that we have an understanding of all the different I'm going to say initiatives or, where each community within Douglas County is and what they're doing to address. I mean, you directly reference Panasonic and the impacts that it will have, but it's the real goal of that group through the ESC to make sure that we have some coordination from a county level in responding to Panasonic. So I'll just ask you to do that.
I think that's a great idea. I have been attending some of those meetings and we're in the process of hiring a consultant to help us out and whatever. And so when everybody says, what are you guys focusing on in Baldwin City? It's housing, it's the rural housing incentive, it's the NRP, it's all the things that we're going to do. Because again, that's where all of our, that's what's going to really make us. We've been a bedroom community, so to speak, for a long time. We saw some changes during the pandemic, as I'm sure you guys did also up here too. I think the future is more people living and working from home. And we see that every day with all the Amazon trucks and the UPS trucks running all over the place. Maybe not as much as we did a year ago, but I think that's a continuing trend. And given all the advantages we have with high-speed internet and all the things we offer, I think we'll become an attractive community for people who want to do that. So we're trying to think in that market too, as well as Panasonic people and sort of that. But I think it's a great idea to have a county-wide approach and a regional approach. Not every day we're going to have a project of that size land in our backyard. So kudos to everybody at the state to make that happen. That's a great benefit for our region here. So we need to prepare for it. So this is a step for us, but I think we need to coordinate that all together. So.
Glenn, can you go ahead and stop sharing?
Stop sharing. Wow.
I know, all kinds of challenges tonight.
Oh, yes. There we go.
Thank
There
you.
it goes.
No, that's just back to our screen.
Yeah. Okay.
That's our screen.
Oh. Nice.
Maybe. Might need the tech
Might
lady.
need tech support again here.
Not my computer. I can do this on my computer. Oh, here. Nope, I got it.
Did I do it? Oh.
There you go. Thank you.
Look at that. Oh, okay. Were there more questions about that? Appreciate your time, all your questions.
I'd like to ask a little bit about the heritage development, because I know that is adjacent to all of your good industrial land in Baldwin City. So you mentioned that some of those acres, maybe I think that was the rice expansion was going to go there. Once geographically, once that district is made into a rural housing incentive district, can you peel away some of those for commercial industrial, or does that need to be designated up front? Because that land is really hard to get back once you lose it.
Yeah, I don't believe you have to take it out though. It's part of the district there. So gosh, I don't remember if you do have to take it or not. Do you remember? Yeah, it's the industrial portion of the heritage.
The red
Yeah.
program, if it's going to be part of, I think my assumption is it's still part of the whole district. But I don't know that answer exactly.
Yeah, actually, I think that's something we probably should look into a little further, just to clarify some of those things, because my understanding of the red law is that it's only for residential.
And it may be just for residential.
Yeah,
Right.
and so if that's the case, like, we just need to clarify, and I'm sure like the appraiser and some of those things are gonna ask some of those questions in terms of that work, but
Yeah, it'd be great.
it is, this is a very unique incentive financing tool. And it is limited to very few places. So I think it is, it is tied to residential in that place. If not, it's a TIF district, which is a completely different ball of wax.
It is.
Right.
I'm fairly certain you're correct. I think it has to have a residential component. and
Yes.
Like Glenn had alluded to, even downtown, if you build residence above, then
Right.
you can get actually, I think the building financed underneath that or the infrastructure of that building. But I think you're right. I don't think anything
But the
commercial
retail-
or the industrial.
Yeah, and the retail underneath would not be abated.
Right.
Right.
And I think that's actually spelled out in the development agreement, but I have to go back.
And from a long-term tax base, you get the tax incentive on the housing, but it's nice to capture that on the commercial industrial, both for the city and the county too.
Right, yeah, see, there's many ways then to capture, I hate to give up any kind of, but if you can trade it off and get something other benefit somewhere in there, that's all to the good. So. Okay.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, open this up for public comment. Don't believe anybody's here with us for public comment. Is there anybody online? Okay, I'll close public comment and bring this back for discussion. I appreciate you both being here and that overview. Thank you also for sitting through our meeting. Hope you learned a lot this evening alongside us about a variety of issues that are county business. I just want to comment that I learned a lot too about this. I've heard about RIDS a little bit and I did not know that the state had sort of loosened its requirements around population. So I learned about it some time ago and didn't learn much more about it because Douglas County no community in Douglas County seemed to be eligible for it. So I appreciate that City of Baldwin has been really intentional about finding all the different opportunities to try and attract that housing development and provide incentives. So thanks for teaching me something new. I'm supportive of this because I just believe that we need a variety of tactics and sort of ideas for how we keep building up housing inventory in this community, because our community is not unique, but we certainly hear about shortage of housing and affordable housing in particular all the time. And that's not unique to Lawrence. It is happening in all of the cities within Douglas County to different degrees, and it's happening across the nation too. So just want to compliment you all for trying to find all the different ways to pull in some more development. And also to any of our county staff who might be listening who are part of this process, appreciate that it is significantly more work for our staff as the tax, the county is the tax collector and manages all of that for all of the taxing districts. And so it is significantly more work, but I'm hopeful that it has some real payoffs and some impacts that are visible. I guess I was going to pull up the agenda again and make sure this isn't, you mentioned that we have the opportunity to object, but short of that, there is no action to be taken. Is that correct, Sarah? Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? Okay. Well, thank you both for being here. We appreciate your time. Have a good rest of your evening. All right. Yes, what's left of it. We hope you had dinner before you came. Okay, with that, we'll move on to appointments, of which we have a couple to discuss. There's one in particular that I'm gonna give Commissioner Willie the opportunity to talk about and make in a moment, but I will also briefly make a reappointment, or I would like to make a motion to reappoint Janet Eikenberry to the JAAA, JAAC Area Agency on Aging, Tri-County Advisory Council. Known Janet for a long time in this community. She's a real staple in the work of senior services and resources, not only in Douglas County, but across our region. So appreciate her willingness to continue in that work and happy to reappoint her.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Willie?
Yes, so one of the boards that I saw mentioned in our list of appointments was the Northeast Kansas Library System Board. Northeast Kansas Library System covers a lot of our small communities through multiple counties in our region. So Lawrence Library is not a part of that system, but Baldwin and Ottawa and Eudora and other neighboring communities do use that system for interlibrary loan, and it's really a lifeline in some smaller communities. So Douglas County does get a seat on that board, and I have a recommendation of Robbie Strom, who is a retired registered nurse, but also a advocate for libraries and library services, and the leader of a local book club, and just a good community-minded person who is willing to serve and fits in the strange geographic requirements of this position, which is within Douglas County, outside of any incorporated city or the township of Eudora.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Thanks for that note. I have read that before and was like, whew, what is very narrow focus, but really appreciate you talking to folks about that and finding somebody. This isn't a seat that's been open for a while, so happy to second that nomination. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you. Sarah, are there any other appointments that have come up? Okay. The other thing I just wanted to discuss during
There's one other.
is, another.
Unless Sarah wanted to do it at a different time, that would be the appointment from our commission.
Yeah, commissioner appointments was something, sorry, I should have been more specific. Or there other appointments to other boards for us to make. But I did want to take an opportunity just to have a discussion amongst us three as commissioners about the boards that we sit on and the seats that we fill. So given Commissioner Portillo's departure, there are a couple of spots that she was filling on the CJCC, KU Innovation Park. I feel like I might be forgetting something, but those are the sort of two more labor intensive, regularly engaged meetings. So just want to discuss that a little bit and particular and see, well, I want to say about CJCC, I have an interest in joining CJCC and filling that seat. However, my schedule does not align with it for the rest of this year. And January is typically when we make commissioner appointments. And so I believe that there's just one more meeting scheduled for this year as far as that goes. So I think that it's probably ideal to just let that stay an open seat for right now, and then we'll make commissioner appointments in January, but just wanted to make public my intention to my desire to join that seat. And then also wanted to discuss KU Innovation Park. And I know Commissioner Willie, I believe that you've had some discussion with that, with Laverne and that board about some of their upcoming meetings, and you're welcome to share anything you'd like about that.
Sure, I'm very happy to step onto that board. I know that assignments get kind of remade in January, but in the meantime, I would like to see that seat filled, and I'm happy to do that. I also have been attending the CJCC just as a non-voting member for my own interest.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate you attending and getting caught up to speed. And it's always, I get a YouTube notification the moment those meetings end. Tell me, then, don't you want to watch this? Yes, I do, but not yet. Commissioner Kelly, are there any other, are you aware of any other appointments that are open? I'm looking at you too, just trying to, I'm trying to mentally run through the list because I didn't pull it up. Okay, so no other ones sort of lingering there. Well, and do we know how many more meetings there are for the end of this year with KUIP? One. Okay. Well, I suppose then the best thing to do is to just make a formal motion to appoint Commissioner Willie to the KUIP board for the remainder of 2022.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any other commissioner appointments to discuss at the moment before we reconvene about it in January? Fresh calendar year. Okay, thanks. All right. Well, beyond appointments, we'll move on to miscellaneous items. Sarah, I'll let you talk about your memo first.
Thanks, commissioners. In addition to my memo, one thing I wanted to talk about tonight is I just want to, we it seems like a long time ago, but on September 29th, we had a community town hall meeting out at the old Wakarusa School to talk about the Wakarusa Road Extension Project. And you know, I just wanted to give the commission opportunity to sort of reflect and on that meeting, and I know there was some discussion about the role of the city of Lawrence in the project. And I guess I wasn't sure if you needed, I don't know that we need a formal agenda item, but I wanted to kind of remind commissioners that maybe that's something we want to discuss. And so other than that, on my memo, the only thing I'm going to point out is that we're still working on a date for the fourth quarter judges luncheon. We're working on it. You do not have a work session next week. Our next work session is the 26th for CIP. There's some good memos attached regarding a family-friendly workplace study survey results that we've done here internally, and as well as an update on the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So I'll let commissioners read those at their leisure, but I just wanted to kind of see if there's any follow-up that we need to be doing on the Wakarusa Road Extension Project. And just as a reminder for the public that, you know, that will be one of many, many projects discussed on 10/26 as a part of our CIP.
Thank you, Sarah. This is Commissioner Reed. I appreciate that. And man, that was one of my favorite meetings as a county commissioner so far. Really loved the format, and I'm super proud of staff and how intentional I thought they were in designing both the presentation and all the information to address the sort of common questions and concerns that we hear about that proposed project so far. And to really give a good history and indication of what some next steps will be. And then the small group discussions and the questions that came up and how commonly themed the questions were between all of those separate groups really stood out to me. So just super pleased with how that went. And I thought it was a really cool opportunity to see so many folks. I mean, we had, I feel like, close to 100 people in that room, folks gather and with all kinds of viewpoints and have some real incredible civil discourse about that. And I've just appreciated it. One theme that really stood out to me was nearly every group, I think, had brought up a question about the city's commitment to the project, given recent news and sort of the progression of some of the discussions amongst the city commission this summer, since the city and county together signed that letter of intent with KDOT to move forward with this project together with the SLT expansion, if it were to come in the future, which we know that it is now. So I would like some, on behalf of the community, I would like to take the opportunity for the Douglas County Commission to ask the City of Lawrence Commission, maybe by a letter from the chair to the mayor, if staff can help me draft that just asks for some clarity on what their intentions are moving forward. So because I believe that informs our decisions about how, if and how we'll move forward. We need a little bit of clarity about that. So, any other thoughts or comments from commissioners about that?
Agreed.
I want to echo, it was really a fun exercise in civil discourse. People listened to each other across factions. They listened well and respectfully. Everyone seemed like they learned something from a perspective that they did not have before. And I heard, even since then, I've heard just some really healthy feedback from people who felt like that the process was healthy, and also that some of the concerns that they had brought to it seemed that there were other people's concerns that perhaps were also weighty, and it was a very healthy conversation. I was glad to be a part of it.
Just so much thanks to staff for their work. I know that was extra time on behalf of staff, and I thought they did a really fantastic job. Sometimes facilitating is an art, right? It is not something you can just step up and do. And I thought they did a great job of asking questions and those notes. And I know you're compiling all of those comments for us, and we'll put that on the website. I agree with Commissioner Reed. I'd like some clarity, having watched their meetings, around where the city is on this. And I think that's appropriate both for our work and so that the city understands as well, and those who are in the outlying areas understand as well as where the city is coming in on this. And, you know, it will require some adjustments to some long-term plans that we have. You know, more so, I would be interested in if we have word from KDOT about how that impacts the work that they want to do. But we need to first figure out what the city wants to do. And then we can sort of broach the question of how that will impact KDOT.
Yep, this is an important partnership and we need to know what to expect so that before we go into our CIP process. So yeah, very much.
I appreciate that feedback, commissioners, and that understanding. Staff will draft that letter and get with the chair to get it signed and sent off as soon as we can.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Something else, Commissioner?
Yeah, I just want to thank Sarah. You said we could look at it quickly, but I did look over at the family-friendly workplace information. Thank you, Jill Jolliker, for that work. And you know, this is something that we've talked about a lot, about that paying our Douglas County employees is definitely important. And I was glad to see on there that they rated livable wages as good and extremely important. So that means we're tracking, not excellent, but good. We'll take that. But I'm always interested in how, you know, we're gathering employees together, whether it comes to benefits or other things. So if anytime you have, I don't know that we need a report tonight. That wasn't what I'm looking for, but I'm always interested in hearing how we're talking to our employees about all the benefits that they get as being a Douglas County employee. And are there some that are less important and some that are more important, and what things we might be able to do. So I appreciate that work.
And I think that's exactly what, that was a conversation that Sarah and I had with Michelle Spreer, our HR manager. That's exactly how we're all thinking about it. And I think that's what you'll see as a next step. And we're hopeful we'll maybe get some feedback from employees. We were circulating that with employees as well in the upcoming employee newsletter. We'll be talking about it with department heads tomorrow to get their feedback. But yeah, there's taking a broader look at what are the larger benefits needs.
We've really been intentional, I think, in the last couple, I mean, I feel like most this year, but maybe half this year, I don't know. With our employee newsletter to really communicate more directly with employees about and make that really a focal point for all of our information as we've kind of transitioned out of an intranet and those different things. So, you know, I think we're getting there, and I think we're, you know, we're just trying to consistently make better communications. As our organization gets bigger, it just gets harder and harder to get the information out. So
I'd be remiss if I didn't also say that the Family Friendly Workplace campaign is Douglas County's participation in that is also part of our role of being a leader in the Douglas County Anti-Poverty Community Health Plan. We've been using the Family Friendly Workplace campaign as a way to engage with our larger employers in the community. So there's a number of employers that have participated in that survey. Work Well, Live Well is going to be hosting a Kids Are Good for Business symposium on November 1st. I hope to have more information about later with partners at Blue Cross Blue Shield and Berry Plastics. City of Lawrence also did the survey, and Hallmark and some others. So it's part of a larger campaign to how do we engage with our public and private employers to solve some of these big gnarly community challenges like childcare, living wages, and folks that are experiencing poverty.
Jill, can you send me a list of the 100? Do we know who the 124 businesses are that completed this? Or do I need to check with the health department? Can they tell me?
Not the health department, it's the Kansas Children's Services League.
Okay.
I can find that out for you though.
Okay. Thanks.
Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, then we are adjourned.